Chapter 8:22. Lin Yuan smiled as he flipped through the contents of the scripture of all life. Then, his smile gradually froze on his face. When I sent out a question mark, it wasn't because I had a problem, but because I thought you had a problem. The scripture of all life did indeed contain all sorts of little techniques for becoming a true god, just as Lin Yuan had guessed. However, the volume was extremely small, and the last one-third of the content was the true cultivation method of the scripture of all life. This cultivation method was not meant for oneself to cultivate at all. In other words, no one would be able to cultivate this cultivation method on their own if it landed in their hands. Its foundation lay in the word, all life. This superclass cultivation method was a textbook. Those who obtained this cultivation method would have to impart the cultivation method of the cultivator stage to all life if they wanted to cultivate it. Then, these people would begin to cultivate it, and their own progress in the scripture of all life would slowly increase. To put it simply, the more people cultivated the scripture of all life, the higher the level of Lin Yuan's scripture of all life. If everyone in a world cultivated the scripture of all life, then in theory, Lin Yuan could crush the heavenly Tao at any time and become an existence on par with the rules, or even an existence that could set the rules. Of course, this mighty power was limited to this world where all life cultivated the scripture of all life. If Lin Yuan stepped out of the heavenly gate, he would lose this mighty power and only retain his cultivation level, becoming an ordinary true god. It seemed like a good prospect, but in reality it was a trap. Whether the heavenly Tao was heartless or had developed its own consciousness, it would not allow anyone to surpass it. Therefore, anyone who wanted to impart the scripture of all life would have to suffer a vicious beating from the heavenly Tao, including those who cultivated the scripture of all life. The heavenly Tao, in my world, no one is allowed to be more awesome than me. That was roughly what it meant. So this cultivation method could be used as a hammer? He couldn't possibly wait until he was stronger than the heavenly Tao before imparting the scripture of all life, could he? Wouldn't that be taking off his pants to fart? He could already crush the heavenly Tao, so why would he cultivate the scripture of all life in order to surpass the heavenly Tao? If you can kill the heavenly Tao of this world, you can give it a try. The system slowly displayed, its killing intent piercing cold. To kill the heavenly Tao in order to cultivate the living being's scripture, what difference was there between him and Hongjun? If Lin Yuan really had this idea, it would definitely not sit idly by. Even if he couldn't deal with Hongjun, he couldn't allow an existence more terrifying than Hongjun to appear. If I can't train, then I won't train. Lin Yuan decisively ended his meditation from reading the Sutra of All Beings. His consciousness regained control of his body as he muttered nonchalantly. Pan Gu was the first to create this world. Everything was born after his death. In such a world, who would allow another great god like Pan Gu to appear? Some people could say, so what if I'm the enemy of the world? However, this kind of person was either the son of destiny favored by the heavenly Tao and had the ability to overturn the entire world, but that was only within the scope of the heavenly Tao's tacit consent. Otherwise, this kind of person would usually die very quickly. Right, isn't it time to release the second phase of the mission? Lin Yuan stretched his slightly stiff body and took the initiative to ask. The second phase of the mission to eliminate the Great Old Ones hadn't been released yet. It was most likely because he had drawn the living being's scripture, which attracted the system's attention. The first phase of the mission eliminate the Great Old Ones has been completed. All rewards have been issued. Next, the second phase of the mission has been activated. Name: Eliminate the Great Old Ones. A type: mandatory mission for all hosts. Number of participants: 7,812 people. Mission Stage 2 progress: 0%. Mission Stage 2: a great war is about to break out. Speed tracing: all hosts have successfully completed the first phase of the mission. This also means that the Great Old Ones have appeared in the world that all hosts are in. Their forms are not fixed, but their appearances are similarly distorted and ugly. They are distorted living beings of the new era hidden in every corner of the world, attempting to resist the flow of the river of time. Now go fight. Expel these ugly monsters. Defend the new era that you have personally started. Mission completion condition. Find the location of the Great Old Ones and launch a military attack on them. When their vitality is greatly damaged, this phase of the mission will be considered a success. Mission countdown. 90 days, mission completion reward. 500 million incense power, 1 chance to ignite the divine fire. Mission failure punishment. The system is fully unbound, and all system skills and models will be stripped. When the second phase of the mission was released, Lin Yuan was slightly stunned. At the same time, even more hosts were cursing. After the curtains of the new era opened, the system's countdown was still counting down. Even the hosts who completed the mission couldn't get the reward in advance. They didn't even know what to do next. Now, here was the problem. How could he find the Great Old Ones of his world in these 90 days and launch a military attack on them, causing them to be greatly damaged? After Lin Yuan started the revolution, the Great Old Ones had already appeared in the Endless Sea, but they were stopped by the Dragon Clan of the Four Seas. If he hadn't come to the Endless Sea by chance and come into contact with the Great Old Ones, he would probably be at a loss now. One could imagine how difficult it was for the hosts in other worlds to find the Great Old Ones, because these mutated monsters might be at the end of the world. Not only did they find them, but the system wouldn't give these hosts such an easy mission. They still had to attack the Great Old Ones until their vitality was greatly damaged. Otherwise, what awaited them was still the system's complete unbinding and depriving them of all system-related abilities. It was equivalent to the system letting them personally trigger the arrival of the apocalypse and letting them watch helplessly as they were swallowed by the apocalypse. Obviously, the system issued the mission with Lin Yuan as the standard. It didn't care whether the other hosts found the Great Old Ones or whether they could find the Great Old Ones. However, in the world where Lin Yuan was, the Great Old Ones were directly riding on the face of the flying dragon and almost appeared in front of him. Therefore, it couldn't give Lin Yuan a reward for nothing. The previous phase of the mission was because it had to start a compulsory mission for all. It couldn't be helped that Lin Yuan took advantage of it. So, the war is about to begin. Lin Yuan's gaze turned and looked in the direction of the Dragon God Temple. The defense line of the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas had collapsed layer by layer. After all, they had suffered a lot at the hands of Lin Yuan during this period of time. Not only did the Long Jiuzi who were transferred out fail to return to the position in time, but they were also all killed. It would be strange if the defense line, which was already tight everywhere, didn't collapse. It didn't stop during the new year and continued to explode. Chapter 8:23. Congratulations, Dragon King, for breaking through the shackles and advancing further on the path of cultivation. Cyrus, Jiao Yi, and Tai Mu were standing outside the palace, their voices full of respect. They couldn't help it. He was too awesome, and they couldn't help but be impressed. Breakthroughs in realms were not rare, but no one was like Lin Yuan, who did not break through a small realm, but advanced to a large realm. Before the breakthrough, he was still at the 8th level of the Mountain Lord realm, and after the breakthrough, he was at the 8th level of the Desolate Demon realm. He did not care about the basics at all. Even those who reincarnated with innate wisdom would have to move forward step by step when they re-embarked on the path of cultivation. Lin Yuan's cultivation method didn't seem like he was breaking through, but more like he was suppressing his own cultivation. When he felt that the time was right, he would release part of the seal and reveal part of his true strength. Thinking along this line of thought, what was Lin Yuan's true realm? However, although this line of thought was off track, it wasn't wrong in essence. Although Lin Yuan was still a level 8 desolate demon, the limit of his realm was the Demon King realm. To him, the ancestor demon realm didn't pose any difficulty or threshold. As long as the gray-scaled flood dragon people or the northern frontier developed well enough and had an endless supply of Joss flames, becoming stronger would be as easy as eating and drinking. You may rise. Lin Yuan didn't have any joy or sadness in his eyes. He just said indifferently, I'm about to go to the defense line built by the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas to carry out my previous agreement and defend the Endless Sea from the invasion of the aberrations. I'll leave the matters here to you. Don't disappoint me. I'll go with you. Unexpectedly, Tai Zun, who had only met Lin Yuan once, took the lead to speak, making the atmosphere oppressive. In the entire Endless Sea, no one was willing to have anything to do with the aberrations. After all, even the powerful Dragon Palace of the Four Seas could barely resist the invasion of the aberrations. Although it was fine in the short term, no one knew what would happen after a long time. Therefore, if they could avoid participating in the war, no one would take the initiative to go. Lin Yuan was also slightly startled. He stared at Tai Mu, as if he wanted to know what this giant crab was thinking. The Dragon King has already said about the aberrations. This is a chaos that will overturn the entire world. Even if we retreat today, we'll just enjoy a few more days of peace. Since we have a chance to fight, why not? Tai Mu raised his pair of giant claws and spoke in a muffled voice. According to the memory provided by the doppelganger, Tai Mu seemed to have come to the Lusher Sea area very soon after it surrendered. It never expressed its own opinion on anything, but it would meticulously complete any request made by Jiao Yi or Cyrus. It was very much like an uninvited tool, rather than a bold existence that dared to bet the future of the entire race on Lin Yuan being destined to rise to the top of the Endless Sea when the situation was uncertain. It wasn't hard to figure out why Tai Mu was hiding his strength. After all, the gray-scaled flood dragon person was related to Lin Yuan by blood. However, his current strength couldn't be compared to the other sea demon tribes. If Tai Mu wanted to become Lin Yuan's right-hand man at this time, he would be courting death. But even if you go with me, I won't take special care of the brave crab tribe. Lin Yuan glanced at Tai Mu and said indifferently. Tai Mu was silent for a while, then said in a low voice, I don't dare to expect that, but I will definitely go with Master Dragon King. First, because the brave crab tribe has surrendered to the Dragon King, there's no possibility of going back. Second, what I said before was indeed what I thought. If we don't fight now while we still have the strength to fight, are we going to wait for them to infect and distort all the beasts in the Endless Sea and then wait for them to come to us? Then you'll go with me. Lin Yuan slightly nodded and didn't say anything more. Then, Jiao Yi and I will take care of the matters in the City of Trade. Cyrus pondered for a while, then took the initiative to take the responsibility. Although it had already guessed that Lin Yuan would definitely cause trouble after returning, it didn't expect that Lin Yuan would not only break through a big realm, but also go directly to the front line to fight those who forced the dragon tribe of the Four Seas to give up the Endless Sea. Of course, it didn't want to go to the front line. Otherwise, Jiao Yi would be in charge of all the matters in the City of Trade, and it wouldn't take any responsibility. But now that Tai Mu had expressed his opinion, if it didn't do something, it would be dead on the spot. All right. Lin Yuan looked at Cyrus meaningfully and nodded again. Including the 2 demon kings from the brave crab tribe, there were 3 demon kings guarding the City of Trade. There shouldn't be any sea demon tribe that would dare to come and cause trouble in a short period of time. After defeating the great old ones, if they came to cause trouble because of their greed for benefits, they would have to deal with the Sea Demon Guild. At the same time, Northern Frontier, Shunning City. Li Zhong tore a piece of paper with a ferocious expression. His gaze swept across the faces of the 3 people in the hall, and he said coldly, Are you all trash? The Association of the Monster Emperor, Yi Bus-ho, and Mi-7 were chasing after Luo Su, but they were easily shaken off by Luo Su, and they even lost people in the process. With your level, I really should consider suggesting to the Dragon King to get rid of you. Luo Su's embroidered uniform guards are enough. The three people in the hall were Li Hui, one of the vice presidents of the Association of the Monster Emperor, Yi Luxing, Yi Bushu's centurion, and Yu Dingchen of Mi-7. These three people belonged to the absolute upper echelons of their respective organizations. This time, they were recruited to follow Luo Su. In the end, in just 2 days, the three of them were ruthlessly slapped in the face by Luo Su. Not only did they lose him, but they also lost a lot of people. In the process, Luo Su didn't even use the embroidered uniform guards. He only relied on his personal ability and anti-reconnaissance awareness to play them in the palm of his hand. Yu Dingchen's expression was also ferocious. The Mi-7 suffered the greatest loss in this joint operation. Especially since the Mi-7 was accepted by the Dragon King and was officially established, this was the first time they mobilized more than half of their people to take charge of an operation. Under the situation where the people in the Frost Mirror Grassland were not moved, he was already going all out. If there was no good result, the Mi-7 that he and Zhang Xiuzhu created together would indeed face the possibility of disbanding. I'll give you one last chance. In 3 days, if you can't catch Luo Su, the three of you can go back and prepare to write a report and a resignation report. Li Zhong flicked his sleeves and his gloomy face returned to indifference. Chapter 824. Lord Li Zhong, please calm down. Yi Luxing slowly raised his head and said in a low voice, "This operation didn't end well, but the three of us worked together and did our best in all aspects. However, Luo Su still disappeared under our noses. This can only mean one possibility. Luo Su has indeed betrayed us. Now there is another force lurking in Shunning City, whose strength is not inferior to ours." And Li Zhong raised one of his eyebrows. "So we can't rule out the possibility that Luo Su took the initiative to act strangely this time to lure us to focus on him or Shunning City, so that the force working with him can carry out some secret operations. So, I personally think that it is unnecessary to continue to keep an eye on Luo Su. What we need to do now is to determine who is working with Luo Su and what their purpose is." Yi Luxing took a deep breath and glanced at Li Hui and Yu Dingchen. He said in a low voice, "I apply for Yi Buyao to withdraw all members from the surveillance and capture plan against Luo Su this time. Then, we will disperse and keep an eye on other places so that we won't be caught off guard." As soon as he finished speaking, Li Zhong rubbed his forehead as if he was seriously considering the feasibility of this proposal. At present, the only force that could lurk in the northern frontier and have the ability to wrestle with the three major intelligence agencies was undoubtedly the Northern Restoration Society. Even the Sky Demon who escaped into the Hengduan Mountains could not hide in front of the various detection and sealing devices and formations produced by the Ministry of Work. They could barely continue to hide, let alone stir up trouble. So, what was the purpose of the Northern Restoration Society to attract the three major intelligence agencies? If it was before, Li Zhong would only snort at the clowns of the Northern Restoration Society. But now, in his heart, the danger rating of the Northern Restoration Society was actually in a rising state, because the members of the Northern Restoration Society were all captured and sent to the Ministry of Works, but so far, no valuable information was obtained. Not to mention finding out the origin of the mutation of these immortals, they could not even kill them. This was a group of real monsters. An unkillable monster. Even if they were soaked in the black water of the Nether Realm, they could not be killed. The Nether River creatures tore them apart again and again, but they could not assimilate them. Their undying ability was even more terrifying than the Nether River creatures. After the Nether River creatures were injured, they would temporarily turn into black water and reform their bodies. However, even if these immortals were torn to pieces, they could quickly reform. The Ministry of Works had even experimented with separating them, but this was meaningless. Once the pieces of flesh were separated too far or couldn't be retrieved, new body tissues would grow out of their bodies. The abandoned body tissues would quickly lose their vitality and turn into powder before dissipating. The purpose of the Restoration North Society, Li Zhong muttered softly a few times. Suddenly, a cold light flashed in his eyes. He gritted his teeth and said, "Their goal is the Ministry of Works." The black water of the Nether Realm and the immortals were all stored in the laboratories of the Ministry of Works of the northern frontier. If these monsters really wanted to do something big behind the northern frontier's back, then there was no doubt that they wanted to attack the Ministry of Works of the northern frontier. Otherwise, there was nothing in the northern frontier that was worth the attention of the Restoration North Society. As for whether their goal was to rescue their companions or to study the black water of the Nether Realm like they did with the Immortals, there was no difference in essence. Because once the other party succeeded, it meant that the Restoration North Society would give the northern frontier a resounding slap in the face. Everyone involved in this matter would be labeled as incompetent. At this moment, the desk behind Li Zhong shone with a red light and an ear-piercing beeping sound. They really did it. Quick, come with me. Li Zhong waved his hand. His face, which had finally returned to normal, darkened again. His desk was connected to many arrays. The other end was directly connected to the offices of various important organizations in the northern frontier. Once the corresponding alarm sounded, it meant that these important organizations were under attack. They had to immediately organize reinforcements. Luo Su, how dare he cooperate with the Restoration North Society? Li Hui said in shock as he ran. Although Lin Yuan was not a cruel and tyrannical ruler, he was willing to kill people, especially those who were incompetent and betrayed. In Lin Yuan's eyes, these two types of people were unforgivable. Yu Dingchen and Yi Luxing followed behind Li Hui with large strides. However, they frowned at the same time and looked at each other. Very quickly, Yu Dingchen gritted his teeth and said in a low voice, "Sir Li Zhong, we will go to the Ministry of Works. You should return to your office and stay there. I have a feeling that this Northern Restoration Conference has finally managed to trick us. It will not be as simple as attacking the Ministry of Works." As soon as he finished speaking, another ear-piercing alarm sounded behind him. Li Zhong carefully listened to the rhythm of the alarm. He gritted his teeth and said, "The death row prison has also sounded the alarm." There were many rules in the northern frontier's new laws. However, when Lin Yuan implemented these new laws, it was to establish a moral standard or a moral bottom line. Even if someone violated the rules of the northern frontier's new laws, they would only be detained, fined, or punished through labor. Very few people would be locked up in the death row prison. However, this did not mean that the death row prison was built for decoration. Those who repeatedly violated the northern frontier's new laws, those who violated the rules and hunted humans or demonic beasts, and those who sold all kinds of prohibited items. These people were all prisoners locked up in the death row prison. According to their crimes, they would bear different punishments or await the arrival of the death row. The Restoration North Society's attack on the death row prison this time was most likely to release the prisoners inside. Whether these people were wreaking havoc in order to take revenge on the northern frontier or simply running away, there was no doubt that it would have an extremely serious impact on Shunning City. It was to the point that they had to prioritize dealing with these felons. They could only watch as the Restoration North Society swaggered away. The other party had obviously made a plan long ago. Moreover, they knew all kinds of information about Shunning City like the back of their hand. For example, the location of the laboratory that the Ministry of Works changed irregularly and how many prisoners were locked up in the death row prison. If no one in a high position told them this information, the Restoration North Society would definitely not be able to find out. The moment the Restoration North Society's plan was launched, Luo Su was directly promoted from a suspect to a criminal. I will lead the palace guards to reinforce the death row prison. I will leave the Ministry of Works to you guys. You must stop the other party. Li Zhong shouted solemnly. He had already changed his direction and ran towards the residence of the prince's mansion guards. Chapter 825. I feel a little uneasy. Lin Yuan narrowed his eyes slightly as he swam at the bottom of the sea. As a demigod, whenever he had such a feeling, it meant that something big was going to happen. Was it the south? Or the northern frontier? Or was it the Dragon Palace that he was about to go to? Lin Yuan pondered for a moment and then called Batu. Batu, what happened at the northern frontier? As the god of war in the northern frontier god system, and with the dragon aura, Batu had supreme authority when he was at the northern frontier. Nothing could escape his eyes. Therefore, it was always convenient to ask Batu. Besides, Lin Yuan could directly order Batu to take action in case Li Zhong and the others were not enough to complete Lin Yuan's deployment. Shunning City was attacked. Northern Restoration Society. It's a god of foreign, evil god. He has subordinates, undead Lin Yuan? It was hard to say whether Batu had made any progress during this period of time, but his spiritual intelligence was definitely not as simple as a newly awakened one. It was not difficult to observe the situation at the northern frontier and report to Lin Yuan, but the way he reported it intermittently, their cooperation was affected by a third party. God? A foreign one? Evil god? Lin Yuan's squinted eyes opened slightly, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. When he was not at the northern frontier, it seemed that some Tom, Dick, and Harry were stirring up trouble again. Lord Dragon King, why do I feel that you are a little uneasy? Tai Mu swam to Lin Yuan, who had slowed down, and asked. Lin Yuan took a deep breath and gently shook his head. I'm fine. Let's continue on our way. Lin Yuan wasn't surprised that there were ancient gods on the northern frontier. After all, in the ancient era of the martial heaven continent, the rulers of this world had been the demonic beasts. No matter how prosperous the current human era was, there was no need to doubt the foundation of a once powerful power. In the endless sea, there were 6 dragon gods, 1 ancient god of lizards, and even more ancient gods. Perhaps most of them had been annihilated in the long river of history, but there were still a lot of them who were struggling at death's door. Although the Hengduan Mountains was the last foothold of the demonic beasts on land, it was still a recognized holy land of the demonic beasts in ancient times. Therefore, it was not surprising that some ancient gods of demonic beasts were sleeping in this place. However, this guy should not be very powerful. If he had the same power as the ancestral dragon, there was no need for him to wait until he was sure that Lin Yuan was not on the northern frontier. If he wanted to, he could directly flatten the northern frontier. The only thing that Lin Yuan cared about was the last word that Bata said, immortal. For true gods and immortals there was no concept of death. At this point, they were basically living as long as heaven and earth. As long as the belief of true gods continued, immortals could survive the 3 disasters and 5 decays and live forever. Even if the world was destroyed, they could cross the sea of bitterness and go to other worlds. The so-called immortal was always for mortal creatures. So there were immortal creatures under his command? This was no small matter. As an immortal, Lin Yuan also had immortal creatures under his command, and so did the creatures from the underworld river. But this was the authority of the god of the underworld. Apart from the gods of the underworld, there were no other gods who could grant their subordinates the ability of immortality. But shouldn't Lin Yuan be the only god of the underworld in the Tianwu continent? This was decided by the will of the world. The Tianwu continent was an incomplete world. There was no heaven realm, no underworld. Lin Yuan, the god of the underworld, was now a general without an army. He did not even have a god of the underworld under him. The underworld had not been opened yet, so the authority of the god of the underworld was not fixed. If an existence with the same possibility of becoming the god of the underworld appeared in the northern frontier, then Lin Yuan was bound to face a huge challenge. This was not a problem that could be solved by a few words and showing off his muscles when facing the ancient lizard god or the ancestral dragon. No matter which world it was, when two gods fought for authority, the war would be incomparably cruel. It was not rare for the war to last for thousands of years. Before one side gave up or died, the war would not end. Batu, find that evil god and kill him. Lin Yuan's eyes flashed with coldness as he silently instructed. Can't beat him, he's very strong. Batu's voice was still intermittent, but this time, he expressed a complete meaning. His previous words had been interfered with by the other side, so some very important information had been erased. But this time, Batu delivered the entire sentence. This also meant that the other side was also using Batu's mouth to declare war on him. Batu was not his opponent. If he wanted to deal with him, Lin Yuan would either have to give up everything in the Endless Sea and return to the northern frontier, or watch him continue to nibble away at the northern frontier and defeat the newly established northern frontier god system. He would completely devour everything about Lin Yuan and turn them into his nutrient. Ding! Congratulations to the host. You have received a provocation from a foreign god and triggered a mission. War of Gods. Name: War of Gods. A type. Triggered mission. The speed. Someone as noble as you only needs to fight steadily, one step at a time, and you will soon become a true god, or even the king of Hades that this world's will has decided. But now, a foreign god whose authority is close to yours is not willing to give up the throne to you, who has yet to become powerful. He has issued a provocation to you. Bet the authority of the king of Hades and fight. Mission completion condition. Kill the foreign god, extinguish his divine fire, and devour his divinity. Mission failure condition. The northern frontier has fallen, all temples of the Blackwater Dragon King destroyed, and all believers killed. Mission completion reward. 1 bloodline evolution. Mission failure penalty. Deprived of the opportunity to become a god. For the rest of your life, you can only grow into a laughable fake god. With just a glance at the refreshed mission, Lin Yuan realized that the difficulty of this mission was definitely not low. The other side's level of difficulty was definitely beyond his imagination. One chance to evolve his bloodline. Now Lin Yuan already had the bloodline of the Flood Dragon, which could barely be regarded as the bloodline of the Dragon Clan. But in the untainted world, this level of bloodline was not even qualified to be cannon fodder. But if he went one step further, no matter which direction he evolved in, he would undoubtedly become a real dragon clan. His abilities in all aspects would usher in a leap of leaps and bounds. Moreover, after evolving his dragon claws, his body's practicality would increase, and he would even have more means of attack. Chapter 8:26. Lin Yuan stopped swimming. Tai Mu approached him again. Although he didn't say anything, one could see the obvious doubt in his eyes. Normally, with Lin Yuan's current status in the Endless Sea, it didn't matter even if he made a great promise. Anyway, those sea demons wouldn't let Lin Yuan fight in the most dangerous front line, which was the only retreat route. They wouldn't even let Lin Yuan go to the battlefield. Therefore, as long as Lin Yuan didn't want to go, even if the defense line of the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas collapsed completely, Lin Yuan could just be a bystander and go home. But now, it was Lin Yuan who was going to the battlefield, but it was Lin Yuan who had to stop again and again. Tai Mu really couldn't understand what this Black Jiao was thinking at this moment. He didn't even bother to pretend on the surface. If you are holding a weapon that can be said to be terrifying, If you release it, it is enough to make any enemy tremble with fear. However, you are unable to truly control this weapon. In fact, you can be certain that if nothing unexpected happens, one day in the future, this weapon will turn its muzzle against you. If that happens, would you release it because of a troublesome enemy? Lin Yuan suddenly asked without thinking. Tai Mu was confused. After thinking for a short while, Tai Mu smiled and replied, "That depends on how tricky my enemy is. If he can really force me to deal with it by using this method that will hurt me a lot, I will definitely release it without hesitation. Otherwise, if I can't even guarantee the present, how can I talk about the future?" Lin Yuan was silent for a while. Then he narrowed his eyes and murmured, "Then let him out." At the same time, in the headquarters of the Northern Frontier Academy in Shunning City, a man with heavy eye bags and a sallow face walked out of the back of the mountain of the academy step by step with his hands behind his back. One could still vaguely see that his clothes used to be a white robe, but now it had been scraped into rags by branches and gravel. The parts that were barely intact were also stained with large patches of mud. His whole body exuded a strange smell. The stench of sweat, mud, blood, various smells mixed together. Along the way, the disciples of the academy subconsciously covered their mouths and noses and made way for him. However, there wasn't the slightest bit of disdain or contempt on the faces of the academy's disciples. When they looked at the man, their eyes were even filled with all sorts of complicated emotions, such as envy, reverence, and so on. Because this man came from Hao Ran Courtyard, it was different from any branch of the Northern Frontier Academy. The Haoran Yard didn't set up any tutors. It just opened up a small cave residence in the back mountain of the academy, where various classics were placed for the disciples to study by themselves. After the disciples entered, the Haoran Yard would start a big tactical formation, which directly isolated part of the back mountain and the cave residence. Then, the disciples of the Haoran Yard would have to rely on themselves for food, clothing, housing, and transportation. Those who could survive to finish those classics and break out of the tactical formation with their own ability would directly reserve a position in the higher-ups of the northern frontier. As for those who couldn't make it out alive, most of them were fed to the evil beasts in the back mountain. Yes, there were demonic beasts in the back mountain of the Northern Frontier Academy, and their numbers were huge. They didn't come here to listen to the teachings of the Northern Frontier Academy, but simply to train the disciples of the Haoran Yard. Here, they could ignore the new law of the Northern Frontier that humans and demons were not allowed to kill each other. Most of the disciples of the Haoran Yard were their rations. One of the selection criteria of the Haoran Yard was that the disciples couldn't have any cultivation until they graduated from the Haoran Yard. If they wanted to learn the way of cultivation, they could go to other branches and compete fairly with their peers. If they wanted to take a shortcut, they had to pay the price. There wasn't much food and water prepared in the small cave residence. Even if they ate less, considering that ordinary people couldn't absorb the spiritual chi of heaven and earth to replenish their energy consumption, they could only eat for 3 days at most. After 3 days, they could either walk out of the safe small cave residence and turn those demonic beasts into food, or pick wild fruits and do under the eyes of the demonic beast. In the eyes of ordinary people, this was a dead end. Either they mastered all the knowledge in the small cave residence within 3 days, or they risked their lives to look for food in the mountains and forests. If they were careless, they would be eaten by the demonic beasts as snack. In fact, this was indeed a dead end. The probability of 1 in 10,000 disciples of the Haoran Yard mastering the knowledge was high. But today, they saw a disciple of the Haoran Yard walking out of the deep mountains. "Senior brother, I'm also a student of the Haoran Yard, but I've been feeling uneasy. If senior brother can teach me something, it's great. I'll definitely give you a generous gift." A young man in a brocade robe walked out of the crowd, as if he couldn't smell the unpleasant odor of the other party. Generally speaking, there were only two kinds of people who applied for the Howren Yard. One was the children of aristocratic families who really had no talent for cultivation. They were born with a family background that others looked up to, but they were not willing to stop there. They hoped to go further and become the powerful class of the northern frontier, instead of an ordinary rich man, such as this young man in brocade robe. While speaking, the manservant behind him took out a small wooden box, which was filled with pieces of crystal-clear spiritual stones. Any one of them could be exchanged for more than 10,000 gold ingots in the secular world. But at this moment, he took out such a large amount of resources, just to give some useful advice. The other kind of disciples of the Howren Yard were the grassroots who had no family background. It made no difference whether they had the talent for cultivation or not. Anyway, with their family background, it was impossible to find any cultivation methods. Even if they were lucky enough to get one or two simple cultivation methods, their family couldn't afford the resources that could make them cultivate smoothly. The cultivation world had always been so cruel. Regardless of the talent, a superior cultivation method was enough to stop 90% of the young people who wanted to become cultivators. When this problem was solved, the consumption of spiritual objects and spiritual stones every day for cultivation was also an astronomical figure. Even if it was a mortal who wanted to build the foundation for his child, he would have to spend a lot of money on medicinal baths a day. Those who didn't have mines really couldn't afford to cultivate. Although the disciples of poor families had the word poor, they could still take out some of their family assets for cultivation. If they were from a grassroots background, even if they entered other yards and got the inheritance of cultivation methods and cultivation resources allocated by the school, they couldn't compare with those of the schools with background. If they didn't want to be assigned to a student as a pawn after graduation, entering the Howren Yard was obviously the only way out. Fair? There had never been any fairness in the world. The cultivation methods taught by the academy were the same, and the cultivation resources allocated were also the same. But if the family was willing to give money and resources to provide a better cultivation environment, who could say anything? Chapter 8:27. Generous gift? There's no need for that. If you want to come out of the back mountain alive, you only need to remember one thing. The sloppy man smiled and muttered, I cultivate noble spirit. Demons and monsters cannot get close to me. After saying that, he smiled apologetically and took the initiative to walk around the youth in embroidered clothes. He walked towards the dormitory that he was originally assigned to. He came from a humble background. He did not have any family background. He was also not favored by any great figure. He was not willing to be reduced to dust, so he could only force himself to risk his life. However, it was all over now. The hardships he suffered and the hard work he put in would all become stepping stones, supporting him to reach the clouds that he yearned for. The young man in embroidered clothes was slightly startled. His brows unconsciously furrowed as he muttered this sentence. On the first day of entering the Howren Academy, there was an instructor who came to deliver the academy uniform to me. What is the use of repeating it to me? What was noble spirit? Even Lin Yuan could not explain it. It was a bit of a stretch to say that it was the path of cultivation, because the people who walked on this path had never been judged based on their cultivation level. If they really cultivated noble spirit, even if they were immortal, they would be able to make demons and monsters avoid them wherever they went. Although it was not the path of cultivation in the Tianwu clan, other than the various rogue cultivators, the three schools of Buddhism, Taoism and Confucianism were at the top. The so-called noble spirit was a kind of philosophy of Confucianism. However, in the entire world, there was not a single Confucian cultivator who cultivated noble spirit. The Confucian cultivators of the Tianwu world were more proficient in calligraphy and writing. With each stroke, they drew on the noble spirit, using the principles of the world to suppress their opponent. Those who were successful in cultivation could casually write a book that could suppress demons and monsters. It could also be used for the younger generation to learn. However, it had to be mentioned that the status of Confucian cultivators in this world had always been very awkward. Under the situation of being on the same level, Taoist and Buddhist cultivators did not dare to say that they could beat Confucian cultivators, but they definitely had the upper hand in a battle of magical powers. More importantly, the other two sects all had cultivation methods above the Kongming realm. If one continued to cultivate step by step, one could become a powerhouse. The Confucian school also had this kind of method, but it could not be cultivated step by step. Or it could be said that each Confucian scholar walked a different path. Some were skilled in poetry, some were skilled in writing, and some were skilled in governing a country. Although each Confucian scholar could not compare to the cultivators of other schools, they were all indispensable existences in the great empires. Even a tyrannical emperor like Lei Qiusheng, who had founded an empire, had to treat the Confucian school with respect and courtesy. On the other hand, when it came to the other two sects that were even more powerful, Lei Qiusheng dared to use thunderous methods on them if they dared to disobey. Although Lin Yuan did not know what the Great Spirit was specifically, he could roughly associate it with something like the path of divine path. Because of the huge flow of knowledge brought by the information explosion in his previous life, Lin Yuan only needed to take a glance at the inheritance of the Confucian school to know that the Confucian school in this world was somehow missing a part. The Confucian school emphasized self-cultivation, family management, governance, and peace in the world. The Confucian school in this world did not have the concept of self-cultivation. No matter what kind of person, as long as they could write calligraphy and write essays, they could call themselves Confucian scholars. However, they forgot that the foundation of all Confucian cultivation was self-cultivation. If a person could not even take care of himself, how could he govern a country? Therefore, on the path of the Confucian school in this world, reaching the Kongming realm was the limit. At this point, with the help of the power of the major dynasties, they could barely be on par with the Taoist school of Buddhism. After all, they had not really stepped into the world of cultivation, and had not even seen the real world of cultivation. They were just ordinary people. Even after countless years, there might not be an existence like the immortal of poetry and the sage of calligraphy. Therefore, to become a Confucian scholar in the Northern Frontier Academy, they had to learn to force themselves to understand the meaning of the Great Spirit under the most difficult conditions. If they could not cultivate the Great Spirit, they deserved to die in the mouth of the demonic beast. Lin Yuan had spent so much money to establish the Howran Academy, and he had also directly promised a high position in the northern frontier as a reward. He did not want to cultivate batch after batch of Confucian scholars in the Kongming realm, not to mention that they might not be able to reach the Kongming realm. On the contrary, if they cultivated the Great Spirit, even if they did not have a cultivation base, they could still speak and repel demons and ghosts. Ordinary demonic beasts could not even get close to them, let alone hurt them. Even if he relied on his cultivation to kill these Confucian scholars who were protected by the Great Spirit, he would not end up well. This was because these people were favored by the heavens. If they died a violent death for no reason, in the world where the will of the world existed, the heavenly punishment and heavenly wrath could be directly arranged. This sloppy man completed the homework set by Lin Yuan and cultivated the Great Spirit. As long as he did not change his mind and insisted on himself, he would be qualified to enter the higher realm of Confucian school. In Lin Yuan's previous life, the Tao initiation realm was the Great Confucian. In the sovereign realm, the sage realm was the Confucian sage. In the transcendent realm, the sage realm was the real sage realm like Confucius and Mencius. In fact, whether to cultivate such an existence had always been a thorn in Lin Yuan's heart. because, in a sense, he was also one of the demons. If he really cultivated a living sage, then he had to consider whether there would be a day in the future when such an existence that he personally cultivated would stand on the opposite side of him for the sake of righteousness and become his biggest stumbling block. But what Tiekuan said was reasonable. Now that the outer gods were on the lookout, he could not return to the northern frontier in a short time. If he did not release these Confucian scholars who had cultivated the Great Spirit, what other means could he use to punish them? Besides, the Great Spirit was different from cultivation. It would not stay the same forever. If one adhered to the right path and studied well, he could even achieve the level of law with his word. However, if one was blinded by wine and meat, the Great Spirit would dissipate in a short time. Not everyone was qualified to become a living sage, was it? Chen Feng, a disciple of the Haoran courtyard, has finished his studies and wants to contribute to the northern frontier. I hope the dean will approve. The sloppy man spoke in a clear voice as he strolled forward. What was strange was that he did not have any cultivation base, but his words were like a great bell. The entire Northern Frontier Academy heard these words. But before these people could recover from their shock, the voice paused slightly, and then began to spread with a louder movement, as if it had resonated with heaven and earth. Everyone in Shunning City heard these words. Regardless of whether they knew where the Haoran courtyard was, they all realized one thing at this moment. In the Northern Frontier Academy, it was very likely that a real monster had walked out. Suddenly, a black cloud seemed to surge over and float above Chen Feng's head. Thunder was brewing in it, as if a thunder punishment was about to descend. Chen Feng just silently raised his head and stared at the black cloud for a moment, and then softly scolded, "Evil spirits, disperse!" There weren't any energy fluctuations, but the moment his voice fell, the dark clouds above his head actually dispersed. Brothers, happy Valentine's Day. I wish all the lovers in the world a happy ending. Chapter 828. In the Hengduan Mountains. Pft! Lei Fan, who was dressed in a white robe, suddenly raised his head and spat out a mouthful of blood, his face looking sickly pale. The backlash from having his technique broken was not pleasant, but to him who had become an immortal, it was just a small problem and he would be able to recover in a short period of time. But at this moment, he clearly realized that what he was about to face was not a small problem. A battle that was separated by countless miles, came quickly and ended quickly. He did not even have the chance to make a move and his technique was broken by a mortal who had no cultivation. That Black Jiao! What kind of monster had he cultivated? He was already so strong when he was still immortal. When he had officially embarked on the path of cultivation, how strong would he be? Don't go looking for trouble with that guy. There is something terrifying coiling around his body. If you see him in the future, just avoid him. A black shadow appeared behind Lei Fan, his voice cold and sinister. Lei Fan raised his eyebrows and questioned, "Avoid him? That's easy for you to say. For this battle, I had calculated the time, place and people, and even used my biggest trump card. I thought that I could give the Northern Frontier a hard blow, but in the end? The Northern Frontier Ministry of Works has not been taken down till now, and those prisoners who are locked up in the death row prison are not willing to cooperate. Even when the prison doors are opened, they are too lazy to run out, as if there is something terrifying outside." Speaking till here, he paused for a moment, his purple eyes flashing coldly. "So what if we have taken down the Northern Frontier Ministry of Works? That Black Jiao is using such actions to slap us in the face. The Northern Frontier Ministry of Works is just one of his methods. This disciple of the Hao Ran Yard is probably the same. For this operation against the Northern Frontier, he had racked his brains and used a large number of secret methods and arrangements, even Luo Su, his trump card that he could only use once. But the result was not satisfactory. He had already lost half of the battle right from the start. I've said it before, you are too anxious. That black Jiao is after all an existence of the same level as me. The black shadow was not anxious at all, and even had the mood to tease him. Besides, only such an opponent has the meaning of conquering. For a battle where you have 100% chance of winning, it is not something that a person of your ability should participate in. To meet such an opponent, you should be excited. However, Lei Fan frowned and said coldly, I don't know what position you are talking about. Back then, it was you who had saved my life. This time, in order to save those immortals under your command, I had even sacrificed everything I had. So from now on, you and I don't owe each other anything. No matter what I do in the future, don't tell me what to do, understand? Ha ha! The black shadow laughed coldly and said mockingly, So back then, you did not even have the power to fight back. You just saw a flaw that I had purposely exposed and you rushed to bite me. I had thought that since you had lost once, you would not make the same mistake a second time. You should have learned your lesson, right? Speaking up to this point, the mockery in his voice deepened. Calm down and look at the whole situation. Otherwise, you will never be able to win against that black Jiao in this lifetime. No matter how many chances I give you, you will still be trampled under his feet. Lei Fan's expression gradually turned ferocious. Don't show such a scary expression. You should know very well that you can't kill me. The black shadow laughed coldly and said in a low voice, Even you are a part of me. What right do you have to kill me? At most, I will admit that your deployment this time is even with me, and we don't owe each other anything. Humph. Lei Fan snorted coldly and turned his head to one side, no longer looking at the black shadow. But what do you plan to do next? At the end of the day, you still want to continue to be the enemy of that black Jiao. But now, those hidden hands that you have arranged have all fallen into the net. Leaving me is equivalent to leaving the Resurrection Society, leaving the Heroic Spirit Corps, and being alone. What do you have to fight against that black Jiao? But this operation is not without any result. We have caught those people from the northern frontier by surprise. Although we did not rescue all the immortals, we have gathered a small number of them. This is not a small force. If you are willing to cooperate with me, I can let you continue to command these heroic spirit. How about it? The black shadow continued to provoke Lei Fan's nerve. Lei Fan's face twitched slightly. The black shadow's words to him were like the whispers of the devil. He knew that being entangled with this black shadow would only cause him to fall deeper into the abyss. But deep in his heart, he unconsciously wanted to agree to this. What hope did he have now? If anyone said that the Shenwu dynasty could still be saved, then this person was either a fool or a joke. If he did not cooperate with this black shadow, and relied on his own strength to deal with that black Jiao, what was the difference between that and sending himself to his death? He was not afraid of death, but he did not want his death to be worthless. I want to know your next plan. Lei Fan turned his head and stared at the black shadow. On the other side, Lin Yuan, who had released a disciple from the Haoran courtyard, stopped for the third time. But it was not because of the chaotic thoughts in his mind, but because there was a small underwater town that suddenly appeared in front of him, which made him and Tai Zhao slightly stunned. In fact, this place had not officially left the territory of the Willowstone Sea region, but Lin Yuan could be sure that this small town in front of him was not the gathering place of sea demons that was recorded in the records of the Willowstone Sea region. It was more like it had suddenly appeared. Tai Zhao only felt a chill on his back. Looking at the small town that blocked the only way, he said in a low voice, Lord Dragon King, this small town is not under the jurisdiction of the Willowstone Sea region. As an old neighbor of the Willowstone Sea region, I never knew that there was a small town here. Lin Yuan slowly raised the tip of his tail and said with a light smile, Since we are here, let's make the best of it. That small town did not belong here, but under the observation of the Eye of God. All the buildings were real. Even looking at the lines, they did not seem to have been built recently. It was more like someone had used some kind of great magical power to move them from the original location of the small town to here. Such a strange town that appeared, and just happened to block the only way through. If one said that it was just a coincidence, no one would believe it. It was just that there was no sign of life in this small town, and it was not clear who had done it. Was it the sea demon tribe that did not want him to risk his life on the battlefield, and deliberately stopped him, or was the situation at the front lines so bad that even some aberrations had broken through the line of defense, and deliberately came to kill Lin Yuan? I will go and explore the way first. Tai Zhao clenched his 2 giant claws, his 8 big feet piercing into the sand, and walked sideways to the strange town in front of him. Chapter 829. It's too troublesome. Lin Yuan shook his head gently. The demonic energy in his body surged, and the water around him began to swirl and converge, forming a dragon image that roared and crashed into the strange town that had suddenly appeared. It was unclear whether the person who had moved to this strange town was a friend or foe. Why did he have to take the risk to test it out? Wouldn't it be the same if he just tore it down and strode over? Demonic beasts should still have their own way of thinking. If he could solve the problem with his hands, why did he have to use his brain? Roar! The 8 water dragon images let out dragon roars and crashed into the strange town. However, a layer of blue light suddenly lit up. The water dragon image that Lin Yuan had used up nearly 700 points of demonic energy only caused a few ripples on the blue light curtain that covered the town. Formation. Lin Yuan was slightly startled, and a bitter smile appeared in his eyes. After the incident at Mount Cloud Crane, he had developed a kind of reverence for formation mages. He was a transmigrator who had a relationship with the heavenly axiom of another world. He had connived with demonic beasts to attack humans, causing endless slaughter. He had also declared himself king and wantonly carried out reforms, leading to terrifying beings like the Great Old Ones. All he had done was to be hunted down by Lin Lixing once. However, the formation master who had set up the evil formation at Mount Cloud Crane did not leave any trace of life in the formation, and it immediately attracted the attention of this world's will. It even used the system to issue a mission for him. Looking at the leopard through a tube, one could see the big picture. If a formation master's power was pushed to the extreme, it would be a kind of power that could defy the heavens. He did not expect that after avoiding the disaster in the south and returning to the depths of the endless sea, the first opponent he encountered would also set up a formation to block his way. Was this a special fate? Thinking of this, Lin Yuan's eyes suddenly turned cold and he growled, "Something's wrong, retreat quickly." Tai Zhuang was stunned by Lin Yuan's shout. He subconsciously turned his head, but his eyes instantly widened. He stretched out a crab pincer and pointed behind Lin Yuan, seeming to be frightened. Clang! A sword chime rang out. A streak of cold light appeared like a white rainbow, instantly piercing through the layers of demonic power barriers that Lin Yuan had hastily set up. It chopped onto Lin Yuan's scales that had turned from black to gold. The remaining force did not stop there, directly tearing apart the scales under the state of the golden body secrets and cutting into his flesh. Only then was the sword force stop. The person who drew the sword was also decisive. Seeing that he couldn't kill Lin Yuan with one strike, he didn't rush to draw a second strike. Instead, he flung the blade of the sword, bringing with it a puff of Lin Yuan's flood dragon blood that was beginning to turn from red to gold. Lin Yuan's figure was like a ghost as he retreated more than 30 meters before coming to a stop. You again! Lin Yuan and the person who drew the sword looked at each other and exclaimed at the same time. The attacker was the fisherman's son who had slashed him a month ago at the invitation of the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas and then left. This flood dragon of yours is quite interesting. The last time we met, You used everything you had and almost lost your life to receive a strike from me. This time, after receiving a sneak attack from me, you managed to receive the formation that you had hastily set up. The speed at which your strength increases is truly terrifying." The fisherman's son's lips curled up slightly. He shook the sword in his hand and chuckled. "It's really too terrifying to make an enemy out of an existence like you. If you don't die, you'll be a thorn in the side of others. No wonder so many people come to me with large amounts of resources, wanting to buy your life." "What? Many people want to buy my life? Then I'm rather curious as to why you're the only assassin here." Lin Yuan's cut flesh began to wriggle and heal. His attribute points were depleted once again, and the golden body secrets that had been knocked down rose again. The fisherman's son lowered his right hand and pointed the tip of his sword to the ground. A strand of golden red blood converged into a drop of blood and fell down. He smiled. "There are indeed many people who want to buy your life. However, out of professional ethics, I can't reveal the employer's information. I can only tell you that most of them didn't come here to put up a bounty for you. They only saw your bounty and casually increased the bounty to a sky-high price in a short period of time." He paused as the smile on his face grew more and more confident. He said in a deep voice, "As for why I'm the only assassin here, can you even ask such a question? In the entire Heaven's Way, which assassin dares to enter the endless sea? It's time for me to monopolize these resources." "You said you're from Heaven's Way. Do you know Ling Yunzi?" Lin Yuan's eyes narrowed again as he looked at the fisherman's son with a cold expression. He did not forget that the will of this world had given him a series of missions to enforce Heaven's Way. According to Perfected Person He's confession before his death, the mountain-protecting array of Mount Cloud Crane and the strange method used to restrain the Taotai in the Taoist temple were all created by Ling Yunzi. However, the will of this world did not acknowledge Ling Yunzi as the person who had set up the evil array. It only wanted him to find Ling Yunzi and obtain more detailed information. So, this Ling Yunzi was actually a cover? The creator and the person who set up the evil array was someone else. He had only taken the title and sold such an evil array to earn money? Oh! The fisherman's son frowned slightly as he asked doubtfully, "So the supreme elder of my sex, Array Dao Peak, is actually so famous? Even a little flood dragon like you who lives in the depths of the endless sea knows his name?" Lin Yuan glanced at the strange town from the corner of his eyes. The fisherman's son then smiled. "That's right. This town was created by Elder Ling Yunzi. In order to prevent you from escaping, I had to fork out my coffin to purchase this array disc. It can be used as a trapping array or a killing array. At critical moments, it can even be used as a Dharma treasure to defend against an opponent's attack with the power of the defense array." TSK. Lin Yuan felt a toothache. The entry level of a Array Dao Master only required one to understand various array patterns and materials. If a traditional Array Dao Master wanted to raise his status and reputation, he would have to set up a true array. The stronger the array, the higher the level of the Array Dao Master. Apart from that, there were two other paths that could not be taken. The first was to modify or simplify the array to a certain extent to increase its effect, increase its power, or simplify the process of setting up the array. This would allow one to set up an array that was not inferior to the original version at a faster speed. The second was to carve an array disk and set up a huge array using various precious materials. Then, one would use mystiques to shrink it continuously and turn it into an array disk that could be carried around. One could use it to set up an array at any time, and it was extremely convenient. If one could achieve either of these 2 points, they could be considered as an Array Dao Master. The person that the will of the world wanted him to kill was at least an Array Dao Master. If an Array Dao Master was given enough time to set up an array, even a true god would be at a disadvantage. Those who were weaker might even be sealed in a certain place until they were completely destroyed. Chapter 830. Formation Tao Masters were the easiest to deal with. Before the formation was completed, they had almost no power to fight their enemies. Even if these Formation Tao Masters embarked on the path of cultivation, most of them cultivated neutral and peaceful techniques or techniques that were specially created to support formations. Very few of them had any means to directly fight their enemies. For this reason, they had sacrificed countless lives before things like formation discs could be researched. At the same time, Formation Tao Masters were also the most difficult to deal with. Their methods were so grand that it was impossible to rely on manpower to complete them. Most of them relied on setting up formations that borrowed the power of heaven and earth. As long as the formation was not destroyed, even if the Formation Tao Master died, the formation would still be able to operate on its own. Some powerful formations did not even need Formation Tao Masters to redraw the formation patterns or change the objects used to suppress the formation core. They could automatically absorb the spiritual energy of heaven and earth to maintain the operation of the formation. If it was an ordinary Formation Tao Master, Lin Yuan could still try to set up a trap and lure them out of their lair before killing them with thunderous means. However, this kind of existence that could inscribe formation discs was not an existence that could be dealt with by changing the location. As long as they wanted to, after taking out all kinds of formation discs, it would not be a problem to turn the vast starry sky into a great formation that sealed the heavens and the earth. Lin Yuan instantly recalled the reward he had received after completing the first stage of the mission. So these heavenly axioms were all stingy? Bah, the behavior of a scumbag. In terms of difficulty, this mission of enforcing justice on behalf of the heavens was probably not inferior to the mission of dealing with the outer god in the northern frontier. Black Jiao, if you have any last words, say them quickly. The son of the fisherman seemed to have accomplished something incredible and was suddenly confident of victory. Lin Yuan's gaze turned slightly and landed on the sword in the son of the fisherman's hand. He said in a deep voice, "You have revealed too many flaws. As an assassin, you talk so much nonsense. Isn't it just to stall for time so that your sword can accumulate power so that you can slash out with an extremely powerful sword? Do you really think you have the chance to slash out with this sword?" From a certain point of view, the sword in the hands of the fisherman was indeed a divine weapon for assassins. It could accumulate sword momentum on its own and multiply the power of the next attack. Had it not been for the fact that it closely resembled the saber-nurturing technique, Lin Yuan would have been wrong about it. Even though it could not be like Lin Yuan's saber-nurturing skill, which could endlessly increase the power of qi and blood, it was probably a sword forge master who wanted to protect his work so that the sword, which he had painstakingly created, would not turn into trash after being unsheathed once. Moreover, the meaning of this sword perfectly fit the profound meaning of the assassin's path. If you don't hit, run 1,000 miles away. To put it bluntly, the might of this strike had already greatly surpassed the strength of the son of the fisherman. In the end, this strike had failed to kill Lin Yuan. As such, the son of the fisherman should have retreated in the face of difficulties instead of continuing to stall for time like a scoundrel so that he could gather strength for his next strike. If a weapon like this were to fall into the hands of the son of the fisherman, it would be like a pearl covered in dust, right? If you weren't so arrogant the last time we met and were determined to kill me, I really would not have been able to resist at all. But now, in my eyes, you are no different from an ant. Lin Yuan's eyes narrowed as coldness rippled through his eyes. The invisible ice immediately condensed into icicles, sealing the son of the fisherman within. From afar, it seemed like a crystal coffin had been created for him. The son of the fisherman did not dare to move, as he was surrounded by icicles. If he moved even slightly, he might be killed by the icicles. At the end of the day, he was only at the void realm. It was only because he had a powerful sword that he could kill or heavily injure demon kings in a single strike. The other demons were in awe of him, not daring to clash with him casually. Usually, he only needed to use a single strike to control the situation. As a result, when he met Lin Yuan last time, he had used a single strike as promised, but he never thought that Lin Yuan would actually survive. Afterwards, he directly left and did not use a second strike. It was not because he was arrogant, but because he was afraid that the other demons would see through his weakness. However, when he met someone like Lin Yuan, who had seen through his little tricks and directly exposed him after only meeting him twice, he did not dare to show any temper at all. Tell me, what kind of organization is Heaven's Justice? What kind of person is that Ling Yunzi? Also, tell me about the bounty on my head. If there's even the slightest mistake, I'll take your head. I mean what I say. Lin Yuan swam to the ice coffin and stared at the trapped son of the fisherman. Seeing him open his mouth, Lin Yuan spoke first. There's no need to use the name of Heaven's Justice to scare me. Since I dare to say it, I definitely dare to do it. Compared to the people I have to face, the entire Heaven's Justice can only be ranked in the middle at most. Do you think they'll fight me to the death for a puny void realm cultivator like you? Only when Lin Yuan saw through his thoughts did the son of the fisherman lower his head like he had accepted his fate. His gaze was somewhat bitter. But if I break the rules, will there be a place for me in the world? The son of the fisherman's voice trembled slightly, as if he was undergoing an extremely intense mental struggle. Since Heavenly Justice is a famous organization in the underworld, you won't break the rules even if you don't tell me. Otherwise, you wouldn't have mentioned Heavenly Justice's name from the very beginning. I'm not interrogating you about Heavenly Justice's secrets, and I don't want your Heavenly Justice's martial arts inheritance. I'm just asking you for information about an elder. If you tell me what you know, you'll at most offend that elder, but you won't break the rules. As for those employers who hired you to kill me, I'm never the kind of person who would leave behind a disaster for myself. Those who are my enemies only have two choices. Either they kneel down and work for me, or I kill them all. Those who kneel down only have one chance. Either I die or their clan is exterminated. Therefore, if they don't have full confidence, they won't do it, and they won't be stupid enough to hire an unknown assassin to do this. Therefore, your employers and those who added the price, I know them better than you do. Lin Yuan's tone was full of ridicule. He lowered his voice and said, So, don't tell me whether I break the rules or not. You only have one chance. Either you tell me what I want to know, or I'll see it with my own eyes. If you want to die, I don't mind. The son of the fisherman's face changed. He suddenly raised his head and looked at Lin Yuan in disbelief. He asked in a trembling voice, You? Who are you after all? How could a black Jiao, who lived in the depths of the endless sea and didn't have the background of the dragon palace of the four seas, know so many secrets? Yes. He was in existence that even the dragon palace of the four seas had to hire people to deal with. How could he be simple? Therefore, you're really not suitable to be an assassin. You don't even know the identity of the other party. You just came here as if there's nothing in the world that you can't kill, and there's nothing that you don't dare to kill. Lin Yuan sighed softly. Chapter 831. The fisherman's son was like a frosted eggplant, listlessly spilling everything he knew. The people who hired Heaven's Justice League assassins were indeed at the bottom of the Dao initiation realm among the Heavenly Gate Guardians, and their numbers were not small. The bounty on Heaven's Justice League's head was not a lot, but it was definitely not a small amount. At the very least, it was a third of the resources they had absorbed from the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce. Excluding the fact that they could not use all of their resources to buy Lin Yuan's death, they also had to consider the various resources they had consumed. To put it bluntly, there were at least 10 people involved in this bounty, which was almost the total number of Dao initiation realm cultivators in the Shenwu dynasty. However, this was also within expectations. After all, Lin Yuan's attitude was so arrogant before, even if they were not present, they would not obediently give up on the profits brought by the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce, let alone give up the territory where their forces flourished. Therefore, joining forces against Lin Yuan, who they did not know where his confidence came from, was undoubtedly a normal thing. Even those who did not want to fight to the death with Lin Yuan had to make a statement on this matter, lest they suffer a loss. However, these people did not dare to act personally, and only dared to hire a force like Heaven's Justice League. This proved that they were indeed afraid of the demon court behind Lin Yuan. Moreover, they had never thought that Heaven's Justice League, whose upper limit was the Void Realm, would be able to send someone who could really kill Lin Yuan. At this moment, they just wanted to use this matter to warn Lin Yuan. Putting aside these matters, what really interested Lin Yuan was the information about Ling Yunzi. This Grand Elder of Heaven's Justice League's Array Path Peak was said to be a down-and-out Array Path Master in his early years. He spent a lot of effort to become a disciple of Heaven's Justice League, earning money by any means necessary to buy various materials and books to study Array Path. He went into closed-door cultivation 30 years ago, and only officially came out 5 years ago. As soon as he came out, he set up a powerful array that crushed other Array Path Masters, and sat on the position of Grand Elder of Array Path Peak. Even the sect master of Heaven's Justice League had to be courteous to him. However, the strange thing was that Ling Yunzi, who had such high attainments in Array Path, had never pointed out anyone's Array Path in front of others. Even if his disciples came to him with questions, he would decline them as much as he could. Only when he met those who were generous, would he ask them to leave the question and come back the next day for answers. After all, the profession of Array Path Master burned too much money, much more than ordinary cultivators. For example, spirit stones were a necessary resource for cultivators. However, it was different from the novels in Lin Yuan's previous world. The spirit stones in Tianwu world could store various kinds of energy, but they could not be absorbed or refined. They could only be carried around to increase the speed of gathering spiritual qi. The Array Path Master's spirit gathering array was to place many spirit stones together to set up the array, increasing the speed and quantity of spiritual qi gathering. However, even the most basic spirit gathering array required close to 5,000 spirit stones. Each spirit stone was worth tens of thousands of gold, and there was no market for it. The rest of the arrays also required a lot of spirit stones, and these spirit stones were only the basic materials. Some of the materials used in the arrays were enough to make even god tycoons feel despair. Therefore, Array Path Masters could not teach each other without risking anything. They had to prepare the corresponding materials or spirit stones. Combined with the information given by the will of the world, Lin Yuan quickly connected the dots. This Ling Yunzi probably did not have any talent in Array Path. Even if he had closed himself up for 30 years, he was still at the same level as before. He had just become a disciple of Heaven's Path, so how could he give pointers to other Heaven's Path Masters? If he really had that kind of ability, and coveted the other party's reward, he would not use such a small trick. The only reason he could answer the other party's questions on the spot and make them come back the next day was because he could contact the Array Path Master who could really answer these questions. In the 30 years of closed cultivation, what did he experience or what did he do? First of all, it could be ruled out that Ling Yunzi was a chess piece supported by some Array Path Master. It was because not all Array Path Masters had bad tempers, but to be able to reach this stage, other than the necessary talent, it was also because they were constantly studying Array Path. Just like what Edison said, a genius was 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. If Ling Yunzi was just a chess piece, the person behind him would not be so easy to talk to. He had single-handedly supported him, and was even able to answer all of Ling Yunzi's questions. He even completely complied with the time Ling Yunzi had promised him. It was as if this array path master had been so bored that his balls hurt, and was just waiting for Ling Yunzi to contact him. There was nothing shameful about array path masters, especially those who could draw array disc. If they were able to develop a powerful array path master, even a true god would be able to face them head-on or even win. Such an existence was almost at the top of the food chain. Even if they were burdened with heinous crimes, no one would dare to say anything if they showed up openly. It was because the law of the jungle was the main theme of this world. If the other party had such ability, why did he have to support Ling Yunzi to be this camouflage while he hid behind the scenes? Did he have an ulterior motive, or, interesting? Forget it. What's more important is that I get to work. Anyway, I'll meet him sooner or later. Looking at the Yu family's son who was gradually getting farther and farther away, Lin Yuan lowered his eyes. With a change of mind, Lin Yuan's figure had already moved. As the Yu family's son had already put away the array discs before leaving, they did not have to continue taking detours. After about 7 days, Lin Yuan, who was traveling at full speed, finally arrived at the front line of the battlefield. This was because he had borrowed the other party's transmission formation when he was passing by the sea. Otherwise, he would not have been able to get here in 7 days. This is the place where the battle with the aberrant is taking place? Tai Mu, who was standing beside Lin Yuan, was slightly stunned. He looked at the ramparts made of willow stones in shock, as well as the obscure inscriptions engraved on the ramparts that made him feel inexplicable palpitations. Moreover, after entering the fortress, it was as if he had stepped into a gravitational field. Even if he used all his strength, he could not resist the water. He could only stand on the path of willow stones on the bottom of the sea and stare at the incomparably tall fortress in front of him. The walls of the fortress were full of demonic beasts of various races patrolling back and forth. The overall atmosphere was incomparably heavy. As far as the eye could see, it seemed that there was not even one whispering to each other. Around the fortress, there were teams of knights coming and going like the wind. They were riding huge, swift sea demons. They carried teams of soldiers and patrolled the front line as if to prevent the aberrant from bypassing the defensive line and attacking the rear. Chapter 832. You're Lin Yuan, right? Thank you for your support, but we still have to do official business. Before entering the fortress, you have to do a mental test to make sure that you haven't been contaminated by the aberrations. Only then can we allow you to enter the fortress. Also, every time you leave the fortress and come back, you have to do a mental test. A sea snake demon swam in front of Lin Yuan. As it spoke, it kept flicking its tongue, giving off an extremely impolite feeling. However, Lin Yuan could observe through the eye of the god that every time the sea snake demon opened its mouth, it would inject some transparent poison into the seawater around it to form an invisible net. Once Lin Yuan had the intention to hurt someone, he had to first pass through the net and resist the attack of the other party's poison. Overly cautious? I'm afraid not. The only lesson that history had taught humans was that humans did not learn any lessons from history. If they had really learned it, then they must have suffered repeated beatings and had no choice but to temper this habit into instinct. Just like in Japan in his previous life, there were always people who came to seek revenge and said that they were disturbing. They would draw their swords and kill the other party when they lowered their heads to return the greeting. Then, they would have to smile and say that they were rude. Of course, this kind of behavior also allowed Japanese swordsmanship to develop rapidly, giving birth to countless swordsmanship that was suitable for fighting enemies in narrow rooms. There's no need. I'm not entering the fortress. I'm here to clean up the aberrations. Just give me a map of the nearby area. Lin Yuan shook his head. A mental test was indeed a method, but it might not be very effective. In the fortress in front of him, there were probably many aberrations who were still in disguise. From the beginning, the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas did not know what they were dealing with. They only thought that the other party had the means to contaminate the minds of living beings and assimilate them into monsters. However, Lin Yuan was very clear that these old rulers were intelligent, and their level of intelligence was definitely not low. After all, the rulers of the old rulers were almost all the most outstanding people of an era. I'm afraid that's not appropriate. The clown sea serpent twisted its body and said in a deep voice, "The aberrant is extremely terrifying. Any action against the aberrant requires the approval of the higher-ups, and then the corresponding personnel will be sent to carry it out. It has happened many times before because the clown sea serpent went to the battlefield without knowing the details of the aberrant. As a result, it caused us huge trouble, so, if you don't provoke the mutants, they won't come looking for trouble with you." Lin Yuan's heterochromatic eyes turned slightly, and he said in a deep voice, "Give me a map of the surrounding area, and I'll do the rest myself. You have no right to tell me what to do, understand?" The Dragon Palace of the Four Seas seemed to be used to being domineering. Even though they could not withstand the attacks of the Great Old Ones, they still put on airs in front of the sea monsters who came to help. They were not even willing to share information, and simply ordered these sea monsters to work for them. However, this kind of bad habit definitely wouldn't work on Lin Yuan. If he wanted to spoil the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas, he would not have flipped the table when he came to the Endless Sea. Yes. The sea serpent seemed to still want to refuse Lin Yuan, but it seemed to have received a message from someone. After gritting its teeth, it lowered its head and agreed. Its figure flashed, and a moment later, it took out a gray stone and handed it to Lin Yuan. A strange picture was engraved on the stone. If one looked carefully, one could see that the content was a map of the nearby area, and it was newly drawn. With the fortress as the center, it included the battlefield in front and the safer rear. Some particularly dangerous places were also marked. Obviously, it was the internal map of the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas. If it were other demon beasts who went out to carry out a mission, they would at most be assigned an old map. Most of the roads might not be able to be traversed, let alone whether the dangerous areas would be specially marked. After glancing at the map and memorizing the general content, Lin Yuan continued to hurry on with Tai Zun, but he was thinking silently in his heart. The cultivation of level 8 of the desolate demon realm was not outstanding in the Endless Sea. After all, a tribe like the brave crab tribe could gather 3 demon kings. If it were forces like the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas and the Sea Demon Guild, they would definitely be able to take out a few hundred demon kings. Therefore, the strength of an individual could not affect the situation in this war at all. The opponent was not a mortal or a beast without cultivation. In the remaining 83 days, Lin Yuan would definitely not be able to severely injure the old rulers with his own strength. Unless it would be best if he could incite chaos and force the old ones to fight to the death with the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas and the various sea demon clans that came to support them. Several battles would break out one after another, and it could even lead to a decisive battle. Now, the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas and the various sea demon clans did not come out and only dared to fight near the Willowstone Fortress. If he wanted to start a war, he could only hurt the old rulers and force them to take the initiative to find trouble. Moreover, it had to be the kind that would not retreat until the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas was taught a big lesson. The first step was to provoke the anger of the old rulers. The second step was to lead this anger to the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas. The third step was to watch the show from the high platform and wait for an opportunity to complete the mission. Thinking of this, Lin Yuan took a deep breath. The demonic power value on the interface jumped crazily and continuously poured into the eye of the god. The range of detection was also constantly expanding. With himself as the center, He could see the entire battlefield and even the surrounding areas. He began to carefully observe every move of the old rulers. These aberrations could not have no goals and only fight to destroy the world. Even if they were aberrated into monsters, they were still flesh and blood. Since they were flesh and blood, they needed to eat and rest. I have to give them a good beating. Lin Yuan's eyes flashed with a cold light, and he muttered in his heart. He quickly brought Tai Mu to a place not far from the fortress, but definitely not close either. Only then did he let out a sigh of relief. Most of the areas within the fortress attack range were watched by countless pairs of eyes. However, outside the range of the fortress, even an existence as strong as the ancestral Gragon did not dare to open his perception at will. This was because he might hear or see some ritual of the old rulers and become uncontrollably aberrated into a monster. Therefore, when he came here, even if those observing him were unwilling, they had to obediently withdraw their gazes. System, is there a way for the people on my side to ignore the spiritual infection of the old rulers? Lin Yuan said in his heart. He had the protection of the system and could ignore the spiritual infection of the old rulers. After all, no matter how powerful those things were, they could not possibly distort the heavenly axiom into a monster, right? However, Tai Mu obviously did not have such treatment. He had to solve this problem first before the plan could officially be implemented. Chapter 833. Lin Yuan, what do you take me for? Doryman? The system was speechless. The mission deadline was not up yet, and Lin Yuan had entered the Endless Sea after completing the layout in the south. He had even charged into the battlefield where the sea demons and the Great Old Ones were in a stalemate at the beginning of the mission. In the end, he didn't even have a way to deal with the mental infection of the Great Old Ones? Are you kidding me? I thought you were omnipotent. Lin Yuan rolled his eyes and teased, as if he was not surprised by the system's answer. Then I'll teach you a lesson. Cut off the vision and hearing of the demonic beast beside you. Then, throw it directly into the middle of the battlefield. With its strength in the demonic king realm, if it doesn't differentiate between friend and foe, when it dies of exhaustion, it will be able to deal enough damage to the Great Old One. If you find 100 demonic kings, you might be able to complete the mission directly. Lin Yuan? When I sent out a question mark, it wasn't that I had a problem, but that I thought you had a problem. If he could gather 100 demonic kings as a one-time use tool, would he still need to do this kind of mission? Lin Yuan sneered and said, the Great Old Ones are indeed very powerful. They have the ability to distort minds, and even the ancestral dragon can be distorted into a monster. No race can gain any advantage from fighting them head-on. However, the reason why they can be surprised from the long river of history is that their era has passed. Just like those gods who have lost their faith will gradually fade away, when they are completely forgotten or vilified by the world, they will also fade away. At this point, Lin Yuan paused, and there seemed to be a smile in his eyes. Didn't they want to tell the world about the ancient stories? I'll do the opposite. Not only do I want to hear their stories, but I also want to clearly explain why their era has passed and how the new era is better than the old era. I don't believe that doing this won't hurt them. The smile in Lin Yuan's eyes grew wider. The system fell silent. Lin Yuan's train of thought was indeed different. In a world where cultivators and monsters existed, the fist was the only reason. No one would deny that Lin Yuan's series of reforms on the northern frontier were beneficial to the present and would contribute to the future. However, among the 7 great empires, only Lei Qiusheng dared to imitate some of the policies on the northern frontier and implement them. Moreover, they were modified and emasculated versions. Not only would they get half the result with twice the effort, it would also depend on the will of the heavens whether they would be effective in the end. Didn't the emperors of the other dynasties know that these policies would greatly weaken the power of the aristocratic families and sects? Did they not know that these policies would make the country rich while making the people rich? They knew. But they did not dare to do so. This was because these reforms would touch the cake of too many people. Apart from Lei Qiusheng, the founding emperor, no other dynasty with a long history would dare to make such a move. This was because in these countless years, it was not only the imperial family that had accumulated resources. Those aristocratic families and sects could not just sit around and do nothing. If they were angered in the slightest, the entire world would be thrown into chaos. Why did Lei Qiusheng dare to implement the emasculated version of the new laws on the northern frontier? Because he was the founding emperor. Those old aristocratic families and sects, no matter which side they took in the rebellion, would have suffered a great loss. A mere few decades were not enough for them to recuperate and build up strength to their peak state, let alone make any further progress. Why did Lin Yuan dare to implement the new laws on the northern frontier? This was because he had pulled a good tiger skin. The truly powerful factions were afraid of the existence of the demon court and did not dare to fall out with Lin Yuan. As long as they did not touch on their fundamental interests, they could even make concessions again and again. As for those factions that were not strong enough, they were killed by Lin Yuan batch after batch. Only then did they create a northern frontier that as long as Lin Yuan nodded, all the factions had to obediently cooperate. Even if he was creating a new era, Lin Yuan was built on the foundation of martial strength. However, who would have thought that when the remnants of the old era counterattacked, Lin Yuan would take an unconventional approach and not fight them head-on? Speaking of which, although Lin Yuan's actions would hurt the old rulers, they did not have much practical significance. This was because there were always some existences in the world who knew that they were wrong but refused to admit their mistake. Some people could do this for the sake of their reputation, let alone the old rulers who fought for their own survival. Then, the meaning of this move was, I want to force them to kill me. Once they gather, the beasts of the endless sea will feel that this is useful. The more the old rulers want to kill me, the more the beasts of the endless sea will want to protect me. In this way, I only need to move my mouth, and I can set up a high platform to watch the show and wait for the war to start. Lin Yuan took a deep breath, and the smile in his heterochromatic eyes gradually disappeared. Insidious. If the system had a physical body, it would probably suck in a breath of cold air. Even though it had been born since Pan Gu created the world, it had not evolved its own intelligence for long. Most of the time, it was in a muddle-headed state. However, after running around in various worlds to cultivate hosts and coming into contact with all kinds of humans and demons, it could be considered to have extraordinary experience. However, it was the first time it had encountered someone like Lin Yuan. Back in the northern frontier, after a trace of kindness brought about a lot of trouble, it was as if he had become a different person. His thinking and actions had become extremely extreme. His starting point had always been for his own benefit. Even if he knew that his thoughts would cause him to kill, when it was time to make a decision, he would not hesitate at all. Since the northern frontier, he had set up traps and tests time and time again to eliminate the people around him who had different thoughts. After creating a situation where one person's word was law, he only trusted Badu, his loyal subordinate. Although he had left a trump card for the northern frontier, how could he not use it to test whether there were people with hidden ambitions in the northern frontier? When he was in the south, Lin Yuan did not kill many people, but the number of families that he had caused was not small at all. In the future, when the cultivators in the south really defeated the demon sect, it would be the time for the sky demon to go south. At that time, more people would die. However, Lin Yuan did not even blink. He even added fuel to the fire, constantly accelerating the process of the cultivators in the south to destroy the demon sect, as if he was afraid that the sky demon would not be attracted. Now that he had returned to the endless sea, he did not even intend to do anything. He directly provoked a bloody battle between the endless sea's beasts and the old rulers. Using the word terrifying to describe such a person was no longer appropriate. If he wanted to bury the entire martial heaven world for his own goals, then that was a question that didn't even need to be answered. Chapter 834. As a result, countless demonic beasts of the endless sea and the old rulers who were fighting on the battlefield suddenly heard a strange intonation from the other side of the battlefield. It was different from the common language of the sky martial continent. This intonation was even clearer and carried an inexplicable power, as if it was the truth of the world. To be able to comprehend any one of the words, it could be said to be a great fortune for cultivators or demonic beasts. Although the pronunciation and language of the old rulers were also very strange, it was only strange. After listening to it, it would only make people feel uncomfortable, and there was no magic that made people want to study it. If it wasn't for the fact that the old rulers could distort the minds of living beings and continuously inject what they wanted to say into the minds of living beings, any living being that saw them would avoid them like snakes and scorpions. The source of the voice was naturally Lin Yuan. He didn't use the common language of the sky martial world, but the Chinese language of his previous life. Although the forms and pronunciations of many Huaxia languages had changed after the changes of time, it was undeniable that the untainted world had really existed. Those sages and saints who had been immersed in the long river of history had also really existed. Any Chinese character placed in the martial heaven world would cause countless cultivators to try to comprehend it. Some of them might even go berserk. That was because behind each Chinese character was a monstrous literary qi and karmic virtue. It was an important part of civilization. It could even be said that without the appearance of characters, human civilization would have stagnated. Adding on their weak bodies, they would have become food for the various beasts in the great desolate world. There were always some people who said that humans were the favored children of the heavens and were favored by fate, so they became the main characters of the world. But in reality, that was not the case. It wasn't that humans were favored by fate that they became the masters of the heavens and earth, but that humans relied on themselves to defeat various foreign races and become the masters of the heavens and earth. In other words, when all the foreign races were defeated by humans, the heavenly Tao could only favor humans. The heavenly Tao was very fair. It would never target anyone, nor would it favor anyone. Even if the Son of Fate was born, it was just a big show set up by the heavenly Tao. Humans relied on their own efforts to achieve what they had today. If they attributed everything that humans obtained to the love of fate, they would be overestimating the heavenly Tao and fate. Lin Yuan used the language of his previous life to express his views. It was not without the intention of taking advantage of the situation. After all, Lin Yuan's current foundation was still not enough to deal with these ancient existences. Even the new era he created was inspired by the peace and prosperity of his previous life. However, it did not matter if they shared the same language. Lin Yuan had never planned to communicate with the great old ones from the beginning. What he wanted to do was to have a battle of ideas with these monsters. As long as the world could understand and the world's will could understand, the victor would naturally be decided. Therefore, it did not matter if the great old ones could understand or not. The key was that once the new era represented by Lin Yuan crushed the old era they represented, they would lose part of their power. In the long run, it was even possible for them to disappear. However, Lin Yuan did not have such an opportunity because this was an open and above-board battle of ideas. Even if he did not appear in front of others, he had to be on the battlefield to do so. It was not like he could casually find a place to say a few words to cause a battle of the principles of the world. It was just like a debate that required both sides. Therefore, once the Great Old Ones sensed Lin Yuan's intentions, they would crazily rush to where Lin Yuan was. Since their ideas could not defeat the ideas of the new era, they could only use force to eliminate Lin Yuan, the only person who knew what the new era looked like. What is that sound? A dragon blood demon beast crushed an aberration, then turned its head to look in the direction of Lin Yuan and murmured, "This voice." When it sounded, I seemed to be in a trance, and I couldn't hear the roars of the aberrations. This voice can actually suppress the power of the aberrations and distort our spirit. It's incredible! Pass down the order. Blackwater Dragon King and Lin Yuan are casting spells to suppress the aberrations on one side of the battlefield. Quickly change your strategic target. Killing the aberrations is no longer the first priority. While fighting, move closer to Blackwater Dragon King's area. Remember, do not let any aberrations break through your defense line and directly threaten Blackwater Dragon King. One by one, the demon beasts swimming at an extremely fast speed under the water ran wildly, transmitting the new orders from the higher-ups of the Sea Demon Alliance to the ears of every soldier. These demon beasts of the Endless Sea were not fools. They were very clear about Lin Yuan's current value. If Lin Yuan could suppress the Great Old One's ability to distort their minds and constantly assimilate them, then these aberrations would not be a big deal except for their disgusting appearance and strength. When the two sides fought fairly, the demon beasts of the Endless Sea did not think that they would lose at all. In addition, the words that Lin Yuan spoke were full of brilliant literary and virtuous qi. Every syllable was incomparably mysterious. The demon beasts of the Demon King realm and above all knew that this language was definitely the most precious treasure they could only dream of. If they could obtain this language from Lin Yuan and study it, their future achievements would be limitless. Sure enough, they're coming for me. Lin Yuan, who was observing the battlefield through the eye of the god, twitched his eyelids slightly, but he still continued to speak. Now, the two sides had not really fought yet. The Great Old Ones were only trying to rush in the direction of Lin Yuan. Although they knew that they had to kill Lin Yuan to successfully complete the plan of overturning the new era, they still had not accumulated enough strength. If they lost this ability to assimilate their enemies, they might not be a match for the demon beasts of the Endless Sea. On the other hand, although the demon beasts of the Endless Sea would attack the Great Old Ones, the various sea demon clans and the dragon palaces of the Four Seas had their own plans in this catastrophe. Just like the Chaos Calamity, no matter how grand the scene was, it was just for selfish reasons. It was still not enough to start a bloody war. Lin Yuan's thoughts moved slightly, and he felt countless gazes fall on him. He knew that those were the top experts of the Endless Sea, and even the true gods of the Dragon Temple had still come. They knew what Lin Yuan's current actions meant, and they also knew that completely eradicating the Great Old Ones was good for everyone. However, they obviously would not let things develop as Lin Yuan had expected. Simply put, it was still for selfish reasons. Now, the situation in the Endless Sea was strange. Although the dragon palaces of the Four Seas were still strong, in the previous battle with the Great Old Ones, not only did they lose a large number of dragon blood demon beasts loyal to the dragon palaces of the Four Seas, they even lost a true god. Chapter 835. In addition, due to Lin Yuan's series of obstructions, 8 of the experienced Dragon Nine Sons had died, and the evil dragon camp, which was used as a hidden hand, had completely broken off relations with the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas, making the already unstable Dragon Palace of the Four Seas even worse. Therefore, this war was very important. If the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas could borrow Lin Yuan's strength to severely weaken the various sea demon clans, the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas would still be able to stabilize its position as the overlord of the Endless Sea after this matter. On the other hand, if the power of the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas was further depleted, it was really unknown who would be the overlord of the Endless Sea in the end. But the problem was, Would everything be fine if they followed the Dragon God Temple's wishes? The endless sea stretched for countless miles, giving birth to countless sea demon clans, and also countless ancient gods from the ancient times sleeping here. Their strength might not be as strong as the Dragon God Temple at its peak, but it could not be ignored. If the two sides disagreed, it was inevitable that they would break up. Thinking about the worst, if the sea demon clans were really dissatisfied with the dragon palace of the four seas riding on their heads and took this opportunity to directly rebel, in the end, they might not even be able to eliminate the great old ones. I was too careless. Lin Yuan muttered softly, his face a little ugly. Although most of what happened at this moment was as he had expected, he did not expect that although the great old one was provoked by his ideologies, he was not as furious as he had imagined at the beginning. It seemed that he had other tricks up his sleeve. Therefore, the one being roasted on the fire now was not the dragon palace of the four seas and the great old ones, but Lin Yuan, the initiator. One had to choose carefully which side to side with, and the concept of neutrality did not exist at all. Could it be? It can't be. Lin Yuan's mind turned, and his momentum weakened a little. Because at that moment, he suddenly realized one thing. The reason why the new era replaced the old era must be because the new era was stronger than the old era. Using the simplest example, in terms of combat power, wasn't the people of the Bronze Age much stronger than the people of the Stone Age? The final outcome of the conflict between the Great Old Ones and himself was inevitable, because Lin Yuan had already seen the answer in his previous life. However, the Great Old One didn't act out of desperation. He only put on an act as if he wasn't worried that Lin Yuan would continue. It was as if, although they were surprised, they weren't surprised. In fact, they weren't worried at all. There could only be one reason for this. The Sea Demon Alliance and the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas behind him must have cooperated with the Great Old Ones. As for whether it was one or a few, it was hard to say. Just like the saying in his previous life, where there were people, there was Jiang Hu. Even if everyone knew that the Great Old Ones didn't come with good intentions and intended to destroy the entire world, this didn't prevent some people from cooperating with the Great Old Ones to clean up the dissidents. Although he didn't know where this confidence that he would be the final winner came from. To put it bluntly, most of the demon beasts behind him were probably colluding with the Great Old Ones, even if the two sides hadn't met face to face. Just like when Zhu Wuying disguised himself as Zhang Xiu and slandered Lei Qiusheng to protect the weak northern frontier at that time, this kind of dark secret was never absent. In his previous life, there were always people who talked about the bad habits of humans, but that was because the only intelligent creatures in his previous life were humans. In this kind of world, the demon beasts that were not inferior to humans in intelligence were not bad when they did this kind of thing. This was the bad habit of all intelligent creatures. In for a penny, in for a pound? Lin Yuan's eyes slightly trembled, and the speed and tone of his speech increased again. The style had changed from a meditation class to a mobilization meeting. The ideas from his previous life were spat out one by one from Lin Yuan's mouth, such as prosperity, democracy, civilization, harmony, freedom, etc. Lin Yuan didn't hold back at all. Between the lines, there was a resonance between heaven and earth, and a warm and inexplicable aura descended from the sky, directly enveloping Lin Yuan. At the same time, the incense power on the system panel jumped crazily. The speed of increase was faster than any of Lin Yuan's previous transactions. This was the power of merit. Educating all living beings was a great merit. Even if Lin Yuan was stirring up the cold rice of his previous life, these advanced ideas didn't exist in the heaven martial world. Through Lin Yuan's description, it was enough to attract a monstrous amount of merit. To Lin Yuan, the most direct benefit was the crazily increasing incense power. Lin Yuan even felt that if he directly converted the incense power into attribute points to improve himself, he might be able to directly step into the Demon King realm and officially condense a divine body. However, an unseen feeling prevented Lin Yuan from having this crazy idea. Indeed, once he condensed a divine body, ignited the divine fire, and forged the divinity, he didn't dare to say that he could directly compete with Hongjun, but his martial strength would at least reach the peak of the heaven martial world. Hungduan Mountain Range, Endless Sea, 6 great empires, and Heavenly Gate Guardians would all come together. But the problem was, what was incense power? It is the foundation of divine power. It is a high-level energy that even existences at the level of Tian Dao and Hongjun have to pay attention to. It is too wasteful to exchange it for attribute points. What's more, Lin Yuan's intuition is frantically reminding him that if he really does this, he will definitely regret it in the future. Gods and mortals seem to only have a difference of one realm, but it could be said that they were 2 completely different existences. At that realm, would attribute points really be of any use? Shut up! How dare you? Black Jiao, what are you trying to do? Dull, thunderous voices exploded in Lin Yuan's sea of consciousness, almost crushing Lin Yuan's mind and stirring his brain into a paste. If that was the case, Lin Yuan would still be able to regain consciousness, but he would also become a muddle-headed idiot. From this, it could be seen how disgusted these big shots, who were watching the battle behind the scenes, were with Lin Yuan's behavior of wanting to start a bloody battle at all costs. The corners of his mouth, nostrils, and eyes were constantly flowing with golden red blood. Lin Yuan was almost clenching his teeth tightly as he continued to spit out word by word. He had no intention of stopping because of these big shots' anger. At the same time, the old rulers finally panicked. This was because they realized that things weren't as they had expected. The existence that had borrowed the power of the new era to fight with them, the remnants of the old era, didn't stop. Instead, it became even more intense, as if it wanted to use this opportunity to completely reduce them to worthless. Thus, the aberrations at the front line went crazy. They twisted their strange, twisted bodies and rushed toward the area where Lin Yuan was. Chapter 836. The number of ancestral demon realm experts that rushed out of Willowstone Fortress was extremely large, but none of them had truly stepped into the threshold of true God. The few Dragon God Temple experts that had officially stepped into the divine path and started to manage the 4 Seas God system did not move. They seemed to be observing and did not care if Lin Yuan would continue this battle of ideals. They also seemed to be secretly afraid of something. However, although these Dragon God Temple experts did not jump out to oppose Lin Yuan, they did not express their stance. In fact, they had already expressed their stance. No matter what, Lin Yuan was still a dragon bloodline demon beast. Even if he did not have a good relationship with the Dragon Palace of the 4 Seas, bloodline was a threshold that could not be crossed. Even if the demon beasts could see that Lin Yuan would have great achievements in the Endless Sea in the future, they did not dare to rope in Lin Yuan because no one could be sure that Lin Yuan would not become the Dragon King of a certain Dragon Palace in the blink of an eye. At this time, the Dragon Palace of the 4 Seas had a bloodline connection with Lin Yuan. At the same time, they had a blood debt with the Great Old Ones. However, no one came out to stop the ancestral demon beasts of the other races. In a sense, they had once again chosen to stand opposite Lin Yuan. So this is the difficulty of my task. Lin Yuan's gaze was cold as he swept across the ancestral demon beasts that were rushing towards him. He originally thought that it would be very difficult to fight against the Great Old Ones. However, in a flash of inspiration, he used the battle of ideals to confront them. This was equivalent to directly crippling the Great Old One's most powerful means. If he let them fight openly with the Endless Seas demon beasts, the Endless Seas demon beasts would definitely have the upper hand. After solving a seemingly difficult yet very simple problem, the real problem appeared in front of Lin Yuan. How should he deal with these ancestral demon beasts? Although Lin Yuan had always been able to fight above his level, there was a difference between gods and mortals. These ancestral demon beasts were already considered demigods. If they accumulated enough Joss flames, it would not be surprising that they could use some god's means. Not to mention that Lin Yuan was promoted by the system and his attribute points were just a standard model. Even if he maxed out his attribute points and entered the blood boil state, he would not be a match for an ancestral demon beast. "Kid, I told you to shut up. Didn't you hear me?" An extremely ruthless voice sounded. Then, a demon beast with silvery white fur like an ape with a pair of horns on its head. It pushed the ancestral demon beasts in front of it, pushed several ancestral demon beasts in front of it, and strode into Lin Yuan's line of ancestral demon beasts. As Lin Yuan looked, he saw that this ape demon beast had a flat nose and a protruding forehead. The fur on its neck was not silvery white, but azure. Lin Yuan's eyes could not help but tremble slightly. Although this demon beast did not introduce itself, its background was probably not simple since it dared to be so arrogant in front of a group of ancestral demon beasts. Moreover, although its appearance was somewhat different from a certain mythical creature in Lin Yuan's memory, some of its characteristics were also abnormally obvious. This fellow probably had the bloodline of Wu Zhiqi, one of the 4 great spiritual monkeys in the myths of his previous life, the red-bone horse-ape. It was the bloodline of a demon beast on par with the great sage, heaven's equal, who had left a shadow in the hearts of countless people. Moreover, the red-bone horse-ape was undoubtedly the best at controlling water among the 4 great spiritual monkeys. Back when Yu the Great governed the Huai River, there was a rebellion by Wu Zhiqi. Even Yu the Great was helpless against it. In the end, it was only with the help of Yinglong that Wu Zhiqi was captured. However, capturing it was not the end of it. Unable to solve the problem of the Huai River, Yu the Great used an iron chain to lock its neck and pierced its nose with a golden bell to suppress it under Tortoise Mountain. Only then was the flood resolved. A water demon that even Yu the Great had to borrow the strength of the Dragon Clan to deal with. From the looks of it, at least half of this fellow's bloodline belonged to Wu Zhiqi. Even Lin Yuan could not help but feel that it was a little tricky. After all, he was only a water flood dragon. Compared to the Dragon Clan in this world, it might be a great bloodline. However, compared to the Yinglong in the untainted world, it was still far from being at the level of Yinglong. Seeing that Lin Yuan did not stop, the demon beast that resembled Wu Zhiqi was furious. It stretched out a claw to grab Lin Yuan. This claw showed a pure golden luster. It grew with the wind 10 feet, 20 feet, 30 feet. When it came to Lin Yuan, this claw had already crossed a distance of hundreds of feet. In front of this claw, Lin Yuan was as small as an earthworm. Lin Yuan's scalp tingled, but he still recited the classics from his previous life. His eyes were fixed on the golden claw that could fall at any time. Even though among the 4 great spiritual monkeys, only the long-armed ape monkey was good at strength, it was not difficult to see that although the 4 great spiritual monkeys had their own strengths, it was only their talents. In terms of strength, there was not much difference. Although there was a difference between being hit by Wu Zhiqi and being hit by the long-armed ape monkey, the difference was not big. This was because this punch could kill. The Dragon Clan of the 4 Seas was still not attacking? Lin Yuan's eyes turned cold. He looked in the direction of the Willow Stone Fortress, his eyes somewhat sinister. Although the Dragon Palace of the 4 Seas had made their stance clear, they did not shed all pretense of cordiality. In this situation where the whole world was against Lin Yuan, if they stood out to take the blame for Lin Yuan, they would definitely be able to gain a good impression of Lin Yuan. In the coming war, it was not impossible to persuade Lin Yuan to push the war in the direction of the Dragon Palace of the 4 Seas. Lin Yuan originally thought that the Dragon Clan of the 4 Seas had this plan in mind. He did not expect that in the end, he had overestimated the Dragon Clan of the 4 Seas. To describe them as short-sighted would not be an insult to them at all. These guys did not make a move only because they were afraid of the demon court, or the guardian who had shown his power in the Dragon Palace of the West Sea might protect Lin Yuan. Therefore, they did not want to directly become enemies with Lin Yuan. They made a mistake in information, deceiving the ancestors of the other clans to rush out to find trouble with Lin Yuan. They wanted to see if Lin Yuan still had any trump cards that he had not revealed. If Lin Yuan did not have any trump cards, then it would be best to let Lin Yuan die here. After all, Lin Yuan had gradually revealed his strength in the Endless Sea. Although the other sea demon clans did not know, the Dragon Palace knew very well that Lin Yuan had already rejected their invitation. It was destined that he would not be on the same boat as them. Therefore, it was not a bad thing to eliminate Lin Yuan as soon as possible. As for how to deal with the Great Old Ones, then it was not up to Lin Yuan, the corpse, to worry. Get lost! Lin Yuan growled, and the power of incense on the interface began to slide down. A 30,000-foot-long black dragon phantom appeared and collided with the golden claw. Boom! The black dragon phantom exploded, and the golden claw was lifted up. Chapter 837. Divine Power? He's just in the desolate demon realm. How can he use divine power? Some of the demon ancestors who were watching the battle were startled, their faces full of disbelief. There were also some ancestral demon ancestors whose faces were filled with greed. They said viciously, "It seems that other than that self-contained language, this kid has quite a lot of good stuff on him. Capture him and interrogate him properly. Perhaps we can take another step forward." That's a good idea. Aren't you afraid of being used as a tool? There were also some ancestral demons who understood what was going on who spoke out. As they finished speaking, more and more demon ancestors came to their senses. Black Jiao had a lot of secrets and each of them was related to a great opportunity. For example, didn't the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas summon Lin Yuan for Lin Yuan to purify his own bloodline and transform from a snake into a flood dragon? For other demonic beasts, this method of purifying dragon blood was not important. After all, they did not have the bloodline of the Dragon Clan. However, this method was of the utmost importance to the Dragon Clan of the Four Seas. Although the Dragon Clan's bloodline was getting weaker and weaker, everyone could see that they used to dominate the Endless Sea with the advantage of their bloodline. Now that their bloodline was getting weaker and weaker, their position as the Overlord was shaken. If they could get Lin Yuan's method of purifying their bloodline, the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas could still be the Overlord of the Endless Sea. For the Dragon Clan of the Four Seas, Lin Yuan's other secrets were not as tempting as the method of purifying their bloodline. But what was the result? Lin Yuan did not hand over the method of purifying his bloodline. It seemed that he was unwilling to cooperate with the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas. Not long after he entered the Dragon Palace of the West Sea, he was locked in the Evil Dragon Pond. Not long after that, the Evil Dragon Pond was destroyed. When Lin Yuan reappeared, he lost 8 of his 9 sons and the last bit of loyalty the Evil Dragon Camp had to the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas. Now, even the spies in the Evil Dragon Camp were found out by Ao Siphon and eliminated in the most cruel way. If it were them, they would not be able to swallow it. Then, why did the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas, which was more domineering than them, swallow it? This Black Jiao was not only hiding a huge secret and a huge opportunity, but also a terrifying existence. An existence that even the Dragon God Temple was unwilling to face. Was it really something that the demon beasts could deal with? Thinking of this, other than the demonic beast that looked like Wu Zhiqi, the other demonic ancestors that had rushed out in an aggressive manner all silently retreated to one side, waiting for the outcome of this battle to be decided. They wanted to see if they should retreat or drink a mouthful of meat soup. However, there were also some timid or cautious demonic ancestors that did not even have the courage to continue staying here. After confirming that this place was difficult to deal with, they actually quietly retreated towards the Willow Stone Fortress. Even the demonic beast that looked like Wu Jiqi had an ugly expression on its face, as if it had just eaten a fly. Although it was a little hot-tempered, it was not a complete brute. At this point, it could naturally see that they had all been used by the Dragon Clan of the Four Seas. What this little black Jiao represented was far more terrifying than what it had shown. But now that things had come to this, could it still retreat? As everyone knew, divine power was a one-time consumable. Unlike Gang Qi and demonic power that could be recovered by themselves, this kind of power could be said to be the key to truly taking that step. Even they had to cherish it, and would not use it unless it was absolutely necessary. And Lin Yuan's move just now had probably used up a lot of divine power. It was likely that he already bore a grudge against it. Countless eyes, both overt and covert, fell on him. Lin Yuan's lips curled into a sinister smile. Then, he said meaningfully, "You have been testing me step by step. Isn't it because you want to see how my foundation is? Isn't it because you want to know if there is a guardian of the demon court behind me? Isn't it because you want to eat the secrets on me?" A series of questions were thrown out. Other than a few confused ancestral demons, the faces of the Dragon God Temple darkened. In a corner of the continent, a few true gods who were observing Lin Yuan through magic treasures also looked gloomy and looked at each other. Although they had indeed done some dishonorable things, no one had made the conflict clear. If Lin Yuan acted like this, how could he get along with others in the future? Was he going to fight against the Guardian of the Heavenly Gate and the demons of the Endless Sea, the two top systems of the cultivation world, with his own strength? Let me tell you today. Bulsh *T, the ancient demon court. Perhaps it has already disappeared in the long river of history. Even if there are remnants, who knows where they are now, hiding and struggling at death's door. This king said that he was the reincarnation of the ancient demon emperor, but he just had too many secrets on him. He pulled out a tiger's skin to scare you. I didn't expect that there would really be fools who would believe him, and there are so many fools. Lin Yuan shook his head and continued speaking slowly. As his voice fell, he did not know how many people were angry. No background? If not, you should have said so earlier. Would we have allowed you to live until today? However, who said that only the ancient demon court can scare you? Lin Yuan's eyes narrowed slightly, and the power of incense on the panel kept jumping. At the same time, a pitch-black crack appeared beside him. Two pale palms slowly reached out and grabbed the black crack. Then, with a heavy tear, the black crack was directly torn into a large black light curtain. It was like an incomparably strong space barrier. In his eyes, it was just a laughable joke. After a while, a young man in a white coat slowly walked out of the light curtain. His face was so pale that it was almost bloodless, and his hair was messy like a chicken's nest. He looked like he had not had a good rest for several days and could suddenly die at any time. However, the field was silent. All the demons stared blankly at the pale young man who had crossed the realm. They were actually unable to sense the cultivation base of the other party. They could only sense the astonishing power that was constantly rising. It was as if the other party could destroy this world with a single thought. What kind of expert was this? A human transcending stage expert, an ancient god among demons. Was he really a match for this pale young man? Ha! The pale young man stretched out his hand and yawned. His gaze swept across the faces of the ancestor demons. With a mocking gaze he muttered, "It's a pity that this world can't allow my true body to descend. Otherwise, I could have obtained a batch of good experimental subject." At this point, he turned to look at Lin Yuan and said doubtfully, "You are only at the fourth realm, but you can fork out 3 million incense sticks. You are really generous. Amazing, amazing." Among the colleagues I know, you should be the youngest and most promising one. Chapter 838. Get to work. Lin Yuan's forehead was full of black lines, and he angrily roared in a low voice. The 3 million incense power was converted from his merit of spreading the Chinese language in this world. However, Lin Yuan only spread it, he did not create it. The majority of the merit given by the will of the world belonged to Cangxia, and Lin Yuan only ate a small part. If he could spread the language, every time someone studied it, Lin Yuan would be able to get a small amount of merit power. However, the 3 million incense power was not even warm, and he was forced to spend it, which inevitably made Lin Yuan extremely unhappy. Powerful hosts could help each other, but hosts who could activate this function had to have accumulated at least 1 million Joss flames in their hands, which meant that they had already reached the later stage of development. This function allowed hosts to communicate with each other, and it could be considered as a practice for the final battle that could come at any time. Lin Yuan should be the only host who had activated this function before reaching the later stage of development. After all, the merit of creating and spreading the language was too great. If he could convert it into his own strength, he would naturally gain more than lose. But now, after working so hard, he actually ended up as a worker? Moreover, the 3 million incense power in exchange for a host who was willing to help and was really free to descend for 3 minutes. In addition, this world was originally not complete, and could only barely accommodate a true god. If he wanted to go further, he had to wait for the world to be complete, or leave the sky martial world to cross the sea of bitterness, and go to a world that could bear more power. 3 million incense power in exchange for 3 minutes of someone else's clone, this trade was a loss to his grandmother's home. However, this guy was not in a hurry to make a move after coming down, and instead wanted to chat with Lin Yuan. It was obvious that he wanted to work but did not put in effort. Kill who? The white coat was slightly startled, and slowly spread out his hands and said with a bitter smile, "You asked me to be a fighter, but you should at least give me a target so I know who to hit, right?" Lin Yuan pulled Tai Ma to his side and said expressionlessly, "It's up to you, except for me and this crab, you can kill anyone." The man in the white coat licked his lips and disappeared in a flash. When he reappeared, he was holding a head that was still dripping blood. The group of ancestral demon experts looked at each other. Soon after, they simultaneously looked towards the demonic beast that resembled Wu Zhiqi. However, they discovered that although its enormous body was still standing on the spot, the head on its neck had already disappeared. Not only had the green fur on its neck been dyed red with blood, even its severed neck was badly mutilated. This kind of injury was obviously not caused by a sharp weapon. In other words, in the blink of an eye, an ancestral demon with a powerful bloodline was beheaded with bare hands? What the hell? Why, just who was the demonic beast here? The ancestral demon ancestors who had gathered their courage and stayed behind were all shocked and furious. However, none of them dared to stand out and face the white-robed man head-on, fearing that they would be the next unlucky one to have their head chopped off. The speed of the ancestral demon ancestors was very fast, at least 3 times faster than when they came here. Lin Yuan even suspected that if they had burst out with such speed from the beginning, he might not have been able to spend 3 million incense power to summon his colleagues. Unfortunately, no matter how swift their speed was, it was completely meaningless before this man in white coat who was swift like a ghost and extremely ruthless in his attacks. Every single breath of time, 1 to 3 ancestral demon realm experts would be beheaded, torn apart, and crushed. These ancestral demon ancestors who ran rampant in the endless sea and could even wrestle with the dragon palace of the 4 seas when they joined forces were rapidly losing members under the white-robed man's pursuit. In fact, because their speed was too fast, they quickly caught up with some demonic beasts who wanted to sneak back to the Willowstone region. These demonic beasts, who had sensed that something was wrong at the beginning and wanted to sneak away, were unable to escape in the end. They also joined the group that was being pursued. This is an ancestral dragon who was guarding the Willow Stone Fortress felt that his breathing had stopped. One person was chasing a group of ancestral demon ancestors and massacring them? Was this reasonable? This was not reasonable. However, this scene was indeed happening in front of him. Although there were many ancestral demon ancestors who had gathered in the Willow Stone Fortress, this was the accumulation of demonic beasts who had reproduced in the Endless Sea for countless years. If not for this, even if the Endless Sea had a geographical advantage, it would not necessarily have an easier time than the Hengduan mountain range. Although the various forces did not get along well with one another, and their hatred was even greater than the other, they had a tacit understanding to only let the younger generation fight. They never dared to involve existences above the Demon King realm. Only when the guardians of the heavenly gates came knocking, or when the old dominators appeared, which was enough to shake the foundations of the entire Endless Sea, would these ancestral demons and ancient gods appear one after another to deal with the troubles that the younger generation could not resolve. Every time the person that Lin Yuan summoned attacked, not only did he kill ancestral demon experts, but he also killed the foundation of the entire Endless Sea. Although the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas' position as the overlord of the Endless Sea was stabilized, it was disadvantageous for the overall situation. A few people from the Dragon Temple wanted to stop him, but after silently looking at each other, no one said anything. Apart from the 4 ancestral dragons, the other 2 dragon gods of the Dragon God Temple were just putting it nicely, but in essence they were only at the ancestral demon realm. Moreover, even the 4 ancestral dragons had never really stepped through that door. Just like the transcendents among the guardians of the Heavenly Gate, they were only separated from the ancestral demon realm and the sovereign realm by a large realm. They were stronger and had a longer lifespan, but they were not real gods. If their faith was broken, they would not be far from death. In essence, they were more similar to the protector Een god that the human empires worshipped with the fate of the nation. This was not their problem, but this world was not complete to begin with. Reaching the threshold of the true God was already the limit. If they wanted to improve further, they could only leave this world, or find a way to make this world complete. However, although they were strong, the difference in their realms was not big. The man in the white coat could kill those ancestral demons like chopping melons and vegetables. If it were them, they might not be able to withstand the second move. Even until now, they did not understand how the man in the white coat attacked. Those ancestral demons did not seem to have the slightest intention to resist. They just kept running and were one-sidedly killed. Without fighting, they naturally could not see the depth of the man in the white coat. Someone is spying on us? Just as the killing was going on, the man in the white coat suddenly raised his head and looked at the sea above. Immediately, he stretched out his right hand and gently pointed. Chapter 839. Following the white coat's light tap. A transcendent realm master, who was spying from a certain corner of the continent, suddenly had a change in expression. He shattered the light screen in front of him with a palm strike, and at the same time, retreated more than 100 feet. His face was still filled with fear. How did the other party discover me? Tick-tock, tick-tock, What's this sound? The transcendent realm master slowly lowered his head, only to find a pool of blood suddenly appearing under his feet. This is before the last thought arose, the transcendent realm master had completely lost consciousness. Immediately after, his clothes were split into 2, revealing his sturdy body underneath. Then, a thin red line slowly appeared on his body. After another moment, his entire body was split into 2, and directly fell to the ground. One finger, killing a transcendent realm master. This step didn't only happen to this person. Other transcendent realm masters, Venerable Realm Masters, and even Tao Initiation Realm Masters were also affected as well. No matter what their intentions were, as long as they stared at Lin Yuan's existence at this moment, they would either die on the spot or pay an extremely painful price. For example, when a white-haired old man in white coat pointed his finger, he also retreated rapidly. At the same time, he reached out and grabbed a Tao Initiation Realm cultivator standing beside him. After a moment, the Tao Initiation Realm cultivator directly exploded into minced meat, and even his soul was directly annihilated. Similarly, the white-haired old man's right hand was also blown into minced meat. What's more terrifying was that no matter how much power he channeled, even if he didn't hesitate to use his precious divine power, he couldn't regenerate this right hand. Moreover, in his perception, his soul was also missing a part of his right hand. This also meant that from now on, even if he entered the reincarnation cycle, he would be born with a disability. He would either be born without a right hand, or his right hand would only be a decoration. What a vicious method! The white-haired old man sucked in a breath of cold air. He reached out and stopped a group of venerable realm masters and transcendents who rushed over after hearing the commotion. His eyes were crimson red. Now, everyone knew that Lin Yuan didn't have the backing of the demon court. However, there was also an extremely powerful existence behind Lin Yuan. Even when the demon court was at its peak, it didn't necessarily have such a terrifying method, right? Killing an demon ancestor was like chopping melons and vegetables. From countless miles away, a casual finger could take the life of a transcendent realm master. What kind of monster was this? What was even more frightening was that they had also heard the conversation between Lin Yuan and the man in the white coat. Although he didn't understand what the so-called colleague meant, judging from Lin Yuan's demeanor and tone, he wasn't the descendant or disciple of the doctor in the white coat. The two of them probably belonged to some special organization. Although there was a huge difference in power, their positions were equal. The other thing was that the man in the white coat had said that this world was unable to withstand his true body, so this existence that could kill as he pleased was only a doppelganger or a puppet. Demon court? The demon court was nothing. Even when the demon court was at its peak, it could not be crushed to death with one hand. The white-haired old man pondered for a moment and sighed. Get people to prepare. See how many resources the northern frontier sent to us. Increase it by 10 times and send it back to the northern frontier. In addition, inform the disciples that if they don't have anything to do, they should immediately head to the northern frontier and help the northern frontier resist the sky demon's attack. Cancel all the probing. Whether it was handing the sky demon to Lin Yuan to deal with or conniving with the Tao Initiation Realm cultivators to deal with Lin Yuan, it was hard to say that these superiors didn't participate in this matter. Perhaps they didn't take action or express their opinions, but the actions of their subordinates couldn't be hidden from them. In a sense, they didn't stop it. All the probing was because Lin Yuan had amazing secrets and opportunities. Originally, the path of cultivation was to fight against the heavens. There was no such thing as being free and unfettered. People who were neither greedy nor ruthless could not survive in the cultivation world. Everyone wanted to swallow Lin Yuan and make Lin Yuan's opportunities their own. Thus, they constantly probed Lin Yuan to see what kind of opponents Lin Yuan could deal with. In the end, good fellow, they were good fellow. Rabbits will bite when forced into a corner. If this black Jiao was forced into a corner, he might even slaughter the entire cultivation world. Furthermore, there was no doubt that someone like Lin Yuan was destined to be a fish in a pond. Sooner or later, he would walk out of the heavenly gates and head to a bigger world to cultivate. It was only a matter of time before he came into contact with the guardians of the heavenly gates. When the time came, Just by looking at how Lin Yuan planned to kick DAO integration stage cultivators out of the game after breaking through, it was clear what kind of bitter consequences they would have to suffer if they became enemies with Lin Yuan. Perhaps it was too late for them to make up for it now, but paying a price to let this matter pass was much better than Lin Yuan directly destroying their inheritance, right? After all, human cultivators were different from the beasts. Although humans had books and words as teaching materials, everyone knew that the most important part of the sentence was actually the first half of the sentence. If there was no master to guide you, even if you studied the cultivation method for your entire life, you might not be able to make any progress. On the other hand, the beasts were particular about bloodline inheritance. They firmly believed that their deceased ancestors still remained in their soul and bloodline. As long as they cultivated step by step, they would be able to unlock the various magical powers and techniques left behind by their ancestors in their bloodline. Thus, as long as the beast's bloodline was not severed, their inheritance would not be destroyed. They only needed time to nurture powerful beasts. If the human cultivation world was heavily damaged by Lin Yuan, the sky martial world would fall into the Dark Age again. At that time, the humans who had bullied the beasts for countless years might even go extinct. No matter how one's heart was, after cultivating to the transcendent realm, one would more or less understand karma. If such a day really came, Lin Yuan would definitely suffer the consequences he deserved. However, those who caused all of this to happen because of their own selfish desires would not have a good ending. Thus, the moment the white-robed man showed his might, countless similar orders were issued from the Heavenly Gate Guardians' forces. Even the Dao Initiation Realm cultivators with big shots behind them began to lower their heads and admit their mistake. Even the big shots had to pay 10 times the compensation. How many times would they have to pay? This was undoubtedly a shocking number. Other than that, there were many Dao Initiation Realm cultivators who did not know what happened in the Endless Sea. They only noticed that many forces had cut off contact with them. Either it was a unilateral declaration, or they were giving up on cooperation bit by bit. Among them, there were some who clearly had the attitude of cutting off contact with them even at a loss, which made them even more confused. However, when they went to look for them, the other party did not say anything. They only looked at them as if they were looking at dead people, and then ordered them to leave. There would always be some people who would be pushed out to vent Lin Yuan's anger, right? Chapter 840. Let's not talk about how the Gate of Heaven's side was in chaos for the time being, but 3 minutes, which was not a long time, had already quietly passed. The young man in the white coat pointed at the ancestor demon who was fleeing in the direction of the Willow Stone Fortress. Then, with a light smile, he stretched out his hand again and cut open a crack in the space barrier. Then, he stepped into it and disappeared. Lin Yuan, who was watching all of this coldly from the sidelines, was still sitting in the same place. His voice did not stop chanting. However, this time, the ancestor demons of the Endless Sea, who were scared out of their wits, did not dare to jump out and say anything. They were not fools and could understand the situation. First of all, they could be sure that the helper that Lin Yuan had just summoned was not from the sky martial world. If he wanted to descend here, he must have paid a sufficient price. Especially this kind of method of not going through the gate of heaven and directly stepping through the void to appear, the price to pay was even greater. Moreover, the other party's descent was not unlimited. In about 3 minutes the other party would have to leave this world. But still, no one dared to provoke Lin Yuan. No one knew what price Lin Yuan had paid, and whether he had enough to summon that person again. No one dared to probe. The last guy who tried to probe had already lost his life. Even the other ancestor demons who were just watching from the sidelines and wanted to see if they could drink a mouthful of meat soup had suffered a calamity. Moreover, the white coat man's fingers seemed to be as light as the wind and clouds, but it contained an extremely terrifying power. It was likely that those who had spied on this place had either died or paid an extremely painful price. Seeing that the endless sea's side had all fallen silent, Lin Yuan disdainfully sneered twice in his heart. This situation was naturally within his expectations. It was just like the nuclear weapons in his previous life. No matter how great the price you had to pay after using it, you only needed to let others know that you had a nuclear weapon in your hand. When others spoke to you, they would not dare to be too presumptuous. 3 million incense power was not much. At least in the eyes of the top hosts, this was only the reward for 3 minutes. But for an existence like Lin Yuan, if it was not for the merit of spreading words, he really would not be able to take out that much. Relying on his own accumulation, who knew when he would be able to accumulate 3 million incense power? Perhaps there were indeed some people who would not give up and continue to probe Lin Yuan. But after today's matter, most people or demonic beasts, as long as they did not have a death grudge with Lin Yuan, they would not easily become enemies with Lin Yuan. At the same time, the situation on the battlefield gradually changed. The Great Old Ones did not expect that almost all the ancestral monsters in the Willowstone Sea would come out in full force and still not be able to stop Lin Yuan from continuing the battle of ideas. This time, they were truly flustered. They commanded the aberrations at the front line to madly attack Lin Yuan's area, wanting to find and eliminate this troublesome opponent, Lin Yuan. However, the Endless Sea's demonic beasts on the battlefield naturally would not let them do as they wished. One by one, they roared and desperately blocked the aberrations who wanted to attack Lin Yuan. Whether it was these demonic beasts or aberrations, they were thrown into the battlefield at this time. In fact, in the eyes of the higher-ups of both sides, they were nothing more than cannon fodder. Simply put, no matter how they fought among themselves, it would not really affect the overall situation. Even if they wiped out all the aberrations, they could not kill the Great Old Ones. If they lurked a little, they would be a ticking time bomb. No one knew when they would be able to brew a disaster comparable to or even more terrifying than today. In the War of the Cultivation World, what really determined the direction of the war was the battle between the strong. However, these Endless Sea's demonic beasts also knew that it was Lin Yuan's strange chanting that completely suppressed the power of the aberrations that had infected their minds. This way, they did not have to worry about being aberrated into monsters at any time, nor did they need to divert some of their attention to suppress their sea of consciousness. They could fight with all their strength. This was how the situation of the battle was turned around, and they would no longer be suppressed by the aberrations. Therefore, protecting Lin Yuan had become their subconscious behavior. It's time to move, right? Lin Yuan's eyelids twitched slightly, and he looked in the direction of the aberrations. It was absolutely impossible for these aberrations, who were temporarily transformed, to be opponents of these Endless Sea's demonic beasts. Even if their bodies were stronger than the demonic beasts after their transformation, and their means were stranger than the demonic beasts, the most fatal thing was that they did not have any discipline. What little intelligence they had left could not allow them to organize the corresponding formation to fight. Even when they encountered other aberrations blocking their way, they would directly attack. These were all fatal problems. If there was the power to distort the minds of other creatures, it would not matter. After all, under this degree of suppression, the opponent could not even use 70% of their strength. Naturally, there was nothing to be afraid of. However, in the current situation, no matter how powerful the aberration's individual strength was, they were not enough to compete with a battle formation. Wanting to kill or stop Lin Yuan was almost an impossible task for these aberrations. After all, the Great Old Ones had not appeared for a long time, and could not compare to the Endless Sea's many years of foundation. Even if they had distorted many demonic beasts for their own use, the number was extremely limited. In addition, now that they were blocked by the Endless Sea's demonic beasts, there was no way for them to replenish their manpower. At this time, one death was one less great old ones. With the help of an alien like Lin Yuan, if the situation went smoothly, when the aberrations were eliminated one by one, the great old ones would not be able to cause any trouble. They would be completely annihilated by the endless sea's demonic beasts. Leaving Lin Yuan alone? That was obviously impossible. Therefore, the ones who were going to make a move next should be the real great old ones, the wise men and heroes of the old era. They were almighty beings who had died in the past. However, this world was not complete. The heaven realm and the underworld did not exist. Even the so-called ascension in cultivation was just stepping out of the heaven gate, crossing the sea of bitterness with the body, and going to a truly complete world. This also meant that the 6 paths of reincarnation in this world were not complete. Although the wandering souls and wild ghosts in this world could not affect the normal operation of the material world, this did not mean that they could not do anything. For example, fallen ancient existences like Yang Qinglin and the Fire Kirin could use all kinds of crooked ways to ensure that their intelligence would not be destroyed. They could even be reborn after absorbing enough energy. Even if they did not want to be reborn, it did not matter. They could still exist in the state of wandering souls and wild ghosts. Even the will of the world could not directly force the truly powerful existences to reincarnate. After all, this world was not complete. It was only the will of the world, and it did not have the power of the heavenly Tao. Chapter 841. Even the souls of ordinary people could resist reincarnation due to various reasons. As long as they could hide from the ghost messenger, they could live forever in this world, let alone those mighty figures with heavenly cultivation. The meaning of the existence of the underworld was to form a sufficiently powerful force, either suppressing or absorbing, sending the souls of these mighty figures into the cycle of reincarnation. Otherwise, ancient mighty figures like the Fire Kirin and Yang Qinglin would be like leaks, popping up from time to time. Whether it was the cultivators of this world or the will of the world, they would probably have a headache. It was just that the world was not complete now. The so-called underworld was just a river condensed by Lin Yuan. Therefore, these old rulers would wake up from the long river of time and struggle to come to the world of the living. They would mutate into all kinds of monsters, trying in vain to strangle the new era in the cradle so that their true spirits would not be destroyed and they would continue to exist in the world and receive incense offerings. Perhaps in the future they would have the possibility of becoming gods. Whether it was for public or private reasons, the existence of these old rulers could be said to be Lin Yuan's mortal enemies, and they were the kind that could not be defeated. The reverse was also true. It's just that, Lin Yuan glanced in the direction of the Willowstone Fortress, and his eyes became somewhat gloomy. He had indeed miscalculated a step before. He did not expect that the monsters of the Endless Sea would have ulterior motive. They wanted to use the power of the old rulers to eliminate the experts of the other sea monster races and ensure that they could become the new overlord of the Endless Sea. In the end, the two sides did not get along, and the matter directly went out of control. Now that those old rulers had appeared to kill him, these big shots of the Endless Sea would probably turn a blind eye to it, right? After all, other than Lin Yuan himself, no one knew if he could summon the white-robed man or his colleague, who had the same combat strength as the white-robed man, to help him. On the bright side, if the old rulers were also afraid of the existence of Lin Yuan's nuclear weapon, they might directly retreat and not dare to continue fighting with Lin Yuan. They would wait for them to discuss countermeasures before coming out to find an opportunity to fight. However, on the other hand, the old rulers might as well advance with their entire army instead of retreating, forcing the monsters of the Endless Sea to come out and fight. Who knew how long these great old ones were going to hide? Lin Yuan had long since figured out the system's quest mechanism. The so-called rewards and punishments were based on the content and difficulty of the quest. They had to conform to the standards of the rules. So, once the quest failed, even if the system was unwilling, it had to give the corresponding punishment. Without the system, could Lin Yuan still be so arrogant? The answer was no. He had been deliberately suppressing his strength, so that every step he took was incomparably firm. He was guarding against the possibility that the system would pull the carpet from under him and directly turn him into a puppet or scrap after defeating the big boss Hongjun. However, while the path was correct, some of its functions were still borrowing the power of the system. For example, without the system's sacrificial exchange, his path to the totem would be broken. There would be no shortcuts to the growth and creation of his spawns, and he could only let them evolve on their own. Do you want to get rid of the shadow of the system? Sure. First, you have to become a god. It was fine if he couldn't become a god, because the system couldn't do anything to him. It could even be said that the system needed him. However, if he couldn't become a god, it was equivalent to binding his future to this world. He was destined to not be able to take revenge, and Lin Yuan would really go crazy. What should I do? Thoughts spun rapidly in Lin Yuan's mind. One idea after another floated up, and one after another disappeared. After about 5 or 6 breaths, Lin Yuan slowly raised his head and looked at the battlefield with a gloomy gaze. Immediately, the principles that he kept chanting suddenly stopped. The palpitating and uneasy distorted spirit changed the situation of being suppressed and regained the upper hand. Caught off guard, many sea demon warriors were distorted into aberrations. The number was actually more than the number of aberrations killed in the previous battle. The remaining sea demon warriors returned to the situation where their strength was suppressed and began to hold their heads and take a beating. The situation of the battle changed again. This Black Jiao, why did he stop again? A sea demon ancestor's face was as gloomy as water, but he didn't dare to get angry. After all, the scene of being chased had left a deep impression on him. He now knew very well that the Black Jiao wasn't an existence that they could casually berate or toy with. Once he bared his fangs, he was a big boss that could surpass them. Even if the Black Jiao's cultivation wasn't high, it wouldn't change this fact. However, he still couldn't help but get angry. After all, they had risked being distorted and rushed out of the fortress to force the Black Jiao to shut up. In the end, the Black Jiao ignored them and instead called out a colleague to kill them. After today, many sea demon ancestors would no longer exist. The territories and benefits that they had taken in the past would all have to be spat out, and they would become inferior sea demon clans. But now? Good heavens, he was forced to stop, but he actually stopped by himself while chanting. At first, the sea demon ancestor, who had realized that Lin Yuan might have a great killing weapon in his hands that even the dragon clan of the 4 seas couldn't help but have a dark expression. After a long while, he gritted his teeth and said, "This guy is teaching us how to do things." Previously, he used some unknown language to suppress the distorted power of the aberrations. He showed us that victory was in our hands and forced us to rush out to stop him. Only then did he show his muscles to intimidate us. His goal is to tell us that he isn't a junior, but an existence that can stand on equal footing with us and even make us fear him. At this point, the sea demon ancestor thought carefully before continuing. As for why he stopped now, it's just to tell us to put away those so-called schemes and obediently exterminate these aberrations. It's because only he can suppress the distorted power of the aberrations. If he doesn't stand on our side, haha, no one will have a good time. Don't even think about becoming the overlord of the endless sea. This Black Jiao is actually this vicious? Those warriors fighting at the front lines are all protecting him. How could he? Another sea demon ancestor spoke. His expression didn't look too good either. After all, among the various sea demon clans, his sea demon ancestor's bloodline was the lowest. At the same time, they also reproduced the most. Close to 30% of the warriors fighting at the front lines were his descendants. Although he didn't feel bad for his descendants when they suddenly fell into a disadvantageous position, he naturally couldn't be happy. This is another part of his intelligence. The sea demon ancestor, who seemed to have seen through Lin Yuan's intentions, sighed softly. Chapter 842. What do you mean? The face of the demon ancestor, who had lost the most descendants, changed. He seemed to have thought of something, but he couldn't be sure. The ancestral demon, who seemed to have seen through Lin Yuan's intentions, shook his head and said, "It is telling us that if we want to play dirty tricks, it is more willing to lose face than us. Whoever is scheming sneakily behind its back, it dares to directly throw away its responsibility and let the endless sea suffer a calamity. Don't forget, this Black Jiao is different from us. His base isn't in the endless sea." Although the demon ancestor had misinterpreted part of Lin Yuan's meaning, the general idea was correct. This was what Lin Yuan wanted to express. He was now volunteering to help. After all, no one knew that he had a mission. Volunteering to help meant that he could quit at any time. Not only did the Endless Sea's monsters not dare to stop him, they even had to hand over their outstanding descendants to Lin Yuan and let Lin Yuan take them to the Tianwu continent to seek refuge. Perhaps they could preserve a trace of their bloodline and not be completely destroyed by the aberrations. He was helping out because of friendship, but not helping out was also his duty. No one could stand out and criticize him. Want Lin Yuan to take the thunder himself? Sorry, that's impossible. Lin Yuan indeed knew the importance of this mission. That was why he was so attentive. However, if he really couldn't do it, Lin Yuan wouldn't force himself to do it. After all, he still had the universal scripture. At worst, he could just take a gamble. If he won, he would eat the whole world. If he lost, his soul would scatter. He liked a phrase he had heard in his previous life. A person's entire life was a gamble. Some people got rich and some lost everything. The real winners weren't lucky, but they were able to find the most important one out of countless opportunities, and then bet everything they had on it. Gambling his life for the endless sea? It wasn't worth it. However, for the sake of cultivating the universal scripture, gambling on whether or not the worlds would dare to touch him. This was worth it. Furthermore, the problem of the Great Old Ones was not something that the beasts of the endless sea could face alone. The guardians of the Heavenly Gate, who were watching the show on the Tianwu continent, could not escape responsibility. They could indeed comfortably stand at the back and reap the benefits, but they also had to think carefully. If the beasts of the endless sea lost to the Great Old Ones, how should they face the invasion of the aberrations from the entire endless sea? At that time, Lin Yuan could still stand out. After all, with the endless sea as a precedent, even if the guardians of the Heavenly Gate were unwilling to cooperate with Lin Yuan, they had to obey him. However, if it really came to that step, Lin Yuan would definitely not just pat his butt and do it. He still had to secretly make arrangements to ensure that the Great Old Ones could exterminate the endless sea demonic beasts as quickly as possible and directly threaten the Sky Martial continent. Only then would it be possible to complete the mission. It was still the same sentence. In front of an absolute egoist, don't talk about righteousness and humanity. Those things didn't exist. These beasts of the endless sea were very greedy, but Lin Yuan wasn't a good person either. He couldn't be the embodiment of selfless justice. He could suffer a loss because of his own calculations, but he definitely wouldn't watch others follow behind his butt and wait to reap benefit. He would rather not let anyone get any benefits, but he would first crush those behind his butt to death. I understand the logic, but this Black Jiao, what exactly is he trying to do? An ancestral demon opened his mouth and said. Among the dragon race of the Four Seas, a young man who had almost condensed a human body flashed in his eyes and said in a deep voice, This Black Jiao is having a battle of ideas with the aberration. He must know something that we don't. It's even possible that these aberrations were created by him, and we're just taking the blame for him. The young man who spoke was the youngest dragon god of the dragon race of the Four Seas. Just by looking at his appearance, he was a handsome man. However, he didn't look handsome. His black hair was wrapped tightly around his two horns. Unless his hair was scattered, no one would be able to tell that this young man had the bloodline of the dragon race. Even if that's the case, what does it mean? This blame has already been placed on us. It's not something that we can avoid. Even if there's a problem with this Black Jiao, he's still a member of the dragon race of the Four Seas. Moreover, the solution to this situation is on him. If you take out your anger on him, you'll only force him to leave the endless sea and leave us here to die. The ancestral demon who asked the question glared at the dragon race youth and growled, "I'm asking what this Black Jiao wants, and what we should do to make him continue to chant that strange language. I'm not here to listen to you shirking your responsibility. If you have the guts, kill the great old ones now. I promise I won't do anything and will even help you kill that Black Jiao. How about it?" "You!" The dragon race youth's eyes turned cold, but he forcibly suppressed his temper and didn't lose his temper on the spot. However, when his gaze fell in the direction of Lin Yuan, the jealousy in the dragon race youth's eyes couldn't be concealed. He was 600 years old this year. Ever since he had awakened his spirit, he had cultivated all the way to the ancestral demon realm. It could be said that everything had been smooth sailing. He was known as a peerless genius of the dragon race who was comparable to the ancestral dragons. There were even some dragon bloodline demonic beasts who believed that if his bloodline was as pure as the 4 ancestral dragons, he might be able to reach a higher realm than the ancestral dragons and become a true immortal existence. He wouldn't have to rely on the worship of the dragon race of the Four Seas to live. However, since the appearance of Lin Yuan, the title of the number 1 genius of the dragon race hadn't fallen on him for a long time. Previously, the Black Jiao had caused a huge ruckus with the dragon palace of the Four Seas and lost a total of 8 of his 9 sons. Even Ao Siphon and the other evil dragons were turned to the opposite side of the dragon race of the Four Seas. However, under this kind of irreconcilable hatred, an ancestral dragon actually openly invited Lin Yuan, who was only at the late-stage River Lord realm at that time, to be the 7th dragon god of the Dragon God Temple. What kind of honor was this? What right did that Black Jiao have? Wasn't it just because he was born into a good family and had many opportunities? If those opportunities were given to him, how could he be in such an awkward situation now? How could this ancestral demon dare to reprimand him? Flames of jealousy burned in his heart, and some strange sounds seemed to ring in his ears. However, no one paid attention to this dragon race youth's secret changes. Instead, they were all discussing what the Black Jiao wanted. "I think," the ancestral demon who had guessed Lin Yuan's thoughts cleared his throat. After attracting a lot of attention, he said, "The aberrations won't allow an existence like the Black Jiao to suppress them. Very soon, experts will appear to kill the Black Jiao. The Black Jiao should have stopped now because he wants to see our attitude. He wants us to send experts to protect him. Otherwise, he will probably turn around and leave, no longer involving himself in this matter." You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.